Hey guys, tonight we begin with the lonely, outcast life of the man paid to do the city's dirty work. Forget the hooded brute with a shiny axe. Think about social isolation, damp socks, and the smell of old stone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the Middle Ages. But you aren't waking up in a castle, draped in silks. And you certainly aren't waking up in the warm, bustling loft of a merchant's house within the safety of the city center. No, your experience is going to be quiet, gray, and profoundly damp. You open your eyes, and the first thing you register is the weight of the air. It's heavy, stagnant, and carries a distinct chill that seems to have settled into the very marrow of your bones during the night. You are lying on a mattress stuffed with straw that hasn't been changed in a season or two. It's lumpy beneath your back, compressing into hard ridges that leave phantom aches in your ribs, and the wool blanket pulled up to your chin feels heavy and slightly greasy with the accumulated humidity of the room. It's early. The light filtering through the cracks in the wooden shutters is the color of dirty dishwater, a dull, sunless gray that suggests the world outside is just as bleak as the room inside. You take a breath, and the air tastes like wet limestone and mildew. There is a distinct lack of warmth here. In a normal medieval home, a small family might be huddled together, sharing body heat, or perhaps a dog would be sleeping at the foot of the bed. But here, the silence is absolute. It is a thick, suffocating silence that presses against your ears. You roll over, the straw rustling loudly in the quiet room, and stare up at the ceiling beams. They are darkened with the soot of countless tallow candles, blackened timber that looks like charred bones in the low light. You lie there for a moment, simply listening. You are waiting for the sounds of the city. Usually, at this hour, if you were a baker or a smith living inside the town, you would hear the low hum of humanity starting its day. You would hear the creak of cartwheels on cobblestones, the shouting of vendors setting up stalls, the clanging of church bells calling the faithful to prime, the first prayer of the day. But you don't hear that. You hear the wind. It whistles low and mournful around the corners of your cottage. You hear the rustle of dry leaves skittering across your threshold outside. Maybe, if the wind is right, you hear the distant caw of a crow or the bark of a stray dog. That is because you are not in the city. You are the executioner. And by law, custom, and the terrified superstition of your neighbors, you are not allowed to live within the walls. You push the heavy wool blanket down to your waist, feeling the rush of cold air hit your chest through your thin linen undershirt. It makes you shiver, a violent, involuntary shudder that wakes you up more effectively than any splash of water. You sit up, rubbing the sleep from your eyes with calloused palms, and look around your dwelling. To the untrained eye, your house might actually look quite nice. It's solid. It has a stone foundation, timber framing, and a roof that doesn't leak too badly. In fact, it's often larger and better built than the hovels of the peasants who work the fields. The city council pays for this house. It is a perk of the job. A benefit, if you can call it that. But the quality of the masonry doesn't matter when you consider the location. Your cottage stands alone. It is legally mandated to be separated from the rest of the community. You are likely situated a few hundred yards outside the city gates, perhaps downwind, where the smells of the town wash over you, but the warmth of the town never reaches you. Or yet perhaps you are located near the leper colony, Or worse, adjacent to the knacker's yard, the place where dead horses and diseased livestock are processed. A facility you are also likely in charge of managing. The isolation hits you before your feet even touch the floor. You look at the heavy oak door, barred from the inside. You know that when you unbar it, there will be no neighbor waving hello. There will be no gossip exchanged over a fence. There is an invisible circle drawn around your home, a radius of infamy. In the eyes of the medieval world, you are unehrlich, dishonest, unclean, tainted. The very air you breathe is considered distinct from the air breathed by a cobbler or a priest. You shift your legs to the side of the bed, the wooden frame creaking in protest. You can see your breath puffing out into small white clouds in front of your face. It's strange, isn't it? The city walls are just there. If you were to open the shutter, you could see the stone ramparts rising up, protecting the good Christians inside from bandits, armies, and wolves. Those walls are a symbol of safety. But for you, they are a symbol of exclusion. You are on the side of the bandits and the wolves. You are the necessary evil that must be kept at arm's length. The dampness of the cottage is relentless. It's not just a surface moisture, it feels as though the house itself is sweating. The stone floor, which you are about to step onto, glistens slightly in the gloom. Because the house is often built on marginal land swampy areas, runoff zones, places no one else wanted to build, the damp rises up from the earth, curling into your bedding, your clothes, and your joints. You flex your fingers, feeling the stiffness in your knuckles. You aren't an old man, but the job and the house age you. The cold makes everything ache. You sit there for another long moment, delaying the inevitable start of the day. You listen to the silence again. It's a lonely thing, waking up knowing that the only reason anyone will speak to you today is if they absolutely have to. You are a ghost in your own life, haunting the periphery of civilization. You provide a service that everyone demands, justice and sanitation. Yet everyone despises the provider. You look at the small table in the corner of the room. A clay pitcher sits there, likely holding water with a thin film of ice on top. Next to it, a hardened heel of bread. The room is sparse, functional, and devoid of the cluttered warmth of a family home. There are no children's toys carved from wood scattered on the floor. There is no embroidery hoop left on a chair. There is only the tools of your trade hanging in the shadows, and the pervasive, damp chill. The psychological weight of this morning ritual is almost heavier than the physical cold. Every morning, you have to remind yourself of the rules. Don't touch the produce in the market. Don't shake hands. Don't enter the church until everyone else is seated. Don't walk in someone's shadow. Waking up requires you to put on a mental armor before you even put on your clothes. You have to prepare yourself to be invisible and hyper-visible at the same time. You rub your face again, feeling the scratch of stubble. The air in the cottage smells of old smoke from last night's fire, mingled with the earthy scent of the thatch overhead. It's not a dirty smell. Exactly. But it's a smell of stagnation. Air doesn't move here. It just sits, waiting. Much like you. Finally, you can't put it off any longer. The bladder is full. The stomach is empty. And the sun, what little of it there is rising. The city gates will be opening soon. The massive iron-bound wood groaning on hinges to let the farmers in. You need to be ready. You need to face the day that doesn't want you. You slide forward on the mattress, the straw prickling against your skin through your undergarments. You brace yourself. You know exactly what comes next. It's the first true shock of the day, the moment that officially ends the sanctuary of sleep and begins the reality of your existence. You look down at the dark, uneven slate of the floor, knowing that no builder in the region was willing to come out here to repair the cracks or lay a rug to soften the chill. It's just you and the stone. You take a deep breath, steeling yourself against the inevitable shiver, and swing your legs out into the void. The moment your soles make contact with the floor, the sensation is less like touching a surface and more like stepping into a shallow pool of freezing water. It is a shock that bypasses the skin entirely, shooting straight up through the arches of your feet, seizing the ankles, and rattling the very marrow of your shin bones. It is the kind of cold that feels heavy, a physical weight that anchors you to the spot, demanding that you acknowledge the absolute miserable reality of a medieval morning. There is no smooth, polished timber beneath you. There are no woven rushes or scented herbs scattered to catch the dust, as you might find in the merchant houses inside the city walls. Here, in this cottage that leans precariously against the wind, the floor is slate rough, uneven, quarried slabs of gray stone that seem to have the supernatural ability to absorb every ounce of frost from the earth below and amplify it. You sit there on the edge of the mattress for a moment, your weight resting on your heels, shivering. The stone is damp. It is always damp. Even in the height of summer, this cottage holds a clammy, subterranean moisture. But now, in the gray pre-dawn light, the flagstones are slick with a thin film of condensation. It feels greasy against your skin. This is the moisture of breath, of boiling pots from days past, of the mist that rolls off the river, all trapped inside these four walls. Because the ventilation is poor and the roof leaks, you curl your toes, instinctively trying to minimize the surface area touching the slate. But it's a losing battle. The cold is patient. It waits for you. It has been waiting all night, seeping up through the foundations, creeping through the cracks in the mortar, filling the room with a silent, invisible pressure. If you were a baker, or a smith, or even a lowly tanner, you might have hired a mason to fix the floor years ago. You have the coin for it. Contrary to what the peasants whisper, the city pays you well enough. You have a pouch of silver buried in a jar by the hearth. But coin means nothing when the hand that holds it is deemed unclean. You look down at the jagged gap between two of the largest stones near your feet. A fissure wide enough to lose a copper penny and dark. Fuzzy moss has taken residence there, thriving in the eternal gloom of your bedroom. You remember the last time you tried to get it repaired. You remember walking to the lower town, standing a respectful distance from the mason's yard, and calling out your request. You remember the way the master mason didn't even look up from his work, just spat on the ground and made the sign of the cross, as if your broken floor was a contagion that could infect his chisel and mallet. No builder will cross your threshold. To repair the home of the executioner is to mark oneself with the same invisible stain that covers you. If a carpenter were to fix your roof, his other customers would abandon him. If a glazier were to replace the oiled parchment in your window with actual glass, the townsfolk would shatter it the next day. So, the house rots. It ages and settles and cracks, mirroring the outcast status of its inhabitant. The floor remains uneven, shifting slightly under your weight. A constant reminder that you are not on solid ground with the rest of society. You finally push yourself up, your knees popping audibly in the silence. The sound is loud, like a dry branch snapping. You are not an old man, but the dampness of this stone cottage accelerates time. It stiffens the joints and thickens the blood. You feel the rheumatism ghosting through your elbows and hips, a dull, rusted ache that will take an hour of movement to shake off. Standing fully upright, your head nearly brushes the low beams of the ceiling. The air up here is thick with the smell of stale wood smoke and old tallow. The fire in the main room died out hours ago, and the cottage has achieved an equilibrium with the outside temperature. You can see your breath, faint plumes of white vapor that drift lazily in the stagnant air before vanishing. It's a quiet, lonely kind of cold. In the city, Even at this hour, there would be the warmth of animal bodies packed into stables, the heat of baking ovens firing up, the collective body heat of thousands of people living shoulder to shoulder. Here, outside the walls, there's only the wind. You take a step, and the sensation of the gritty slate shifts. Your left foot finds a patch of dirt where the stone has crumbled away entirely. The earth is packed hard, cold as iron. You walk gingerly, navigating the topography of your own bedroom by memory and touch. You know exactly where the sharp ridge of the broken slate is. So you step over it. You know which flagstone rocks with a hollow clunk if you tread on its corner. So you avoid it to keep the silence unbroken. It is a strange, intimate dance you perform every morning, a silent negotiation with a house that is slowly falling apart. As you move away from the bed, the draft hits you. It's a distinct current of air, sharp and directed, cutting through the room at waist height. It comes from the north wall, where the wattle and daub the mixture of woven sticks, mud, and straw that makes up the skin of your home has eroded. There is a hole there, roughly the size of a man's fist, stuffed with an old, mildewed woolen rag. The rag has shrunk in the cold, leaving gaps that allow the wind to whistle through with a high, mournful pitch. You pause, staring at the wall in the gloom. You could fix it yourself, of course. You have hands. You have access to mud. But there is a lethargy that comes with this profession, a heavy, dragging weight on the soul that makes home improvement feel futile. Why patch the wall when the town council might decide to move the gallows next year and force you to relocate to an even worse hovel? Why sweep the floor when you will only drag the filth of the dungeons back in with you by sunset? The house is merely a container for your sleeping body, a box to keep the rain off the headsman. It is not a home. You wrap your arms around your chest, rubbing your bare shoulders. The skin is pebbled with goose flesh. The cold is insistent now, biting at your exposed skin, urging you to move, to cover yourself, to start the grim routine of the day. But for a moment longer, you just stand there, your feet numb on the freezing slate, listening. You are listening for the city. From this distance, separated by the open killing fields and the refuse ditches, the city is just a low hum. You can hear the faint tolling of a church bell matins. Perhaps, or lauds calling the righteous to prayer. You can hear the distant barking of dogs, the rattle of a cart on the cobblestones near the main gate. Those sounds are the soundtrack of a community that functions, a great machine of commerce and faith and family gearing up for another day. But here, on your island of broken stone, there is silence. The only sound is the wind hissing through the thatch and the blood rushing in your own ears. The isolation is palpable. It's not just that you are alone in the room, it's the knowledge that for a mile in any direction, no one wants you to be there. You are a necessary evil, legally mandated to live where the wind will carry the miasma of your presence away from the decent nostrils. You are a human barrier between the civilization of the town and the wild, chaotic dark of the countryside. You shift your weight, and the cold shoots up your legs again, a fresh reminder of your physical discomfort. Your feet are aching now, a burning, throbbing pain caused by the temperature difference. You need to get off this stone. You need layers. You need the armor of your trade. You shuffle across the room toward the wooden chest that sits in the corner. The wood is dark, stained with age and the oils from your hands. It contains your identity. It contains the fabric that transforms you from a shivering, lonely man in a broken cottage into the figure of dread that the city requires. Reaching the chest, you kneel. The movement brings your knees into contact with the slate, a brutal, unforgiving impact that makes you wince. The cold bites hard into the bone. You grit your teeth, ignoring the discomfort, and flip the heavy iron latch. It clatters loudly, the sound harsh and violent in the quiet room. You lift the lid, and the smell of the contents wafts up to greet you. It is not the smell of lavender or cedar. It is the smell of heavy, unwashed wool, of iron filings, and a faint, lingering trace of old dried blood that no amount of scrubbing can ever fully remove. You reach inside, your hands brushing against the rough texture of your tunic. The fabric is cold, having absorbed the chill of the room all night, but it promises a barrier against the air. It promises a role to play. You prepare to shed the vulnerability of the naked man and assume the heavy, suffocating mantle of the executioner. But first, you must endure the transition, the agonizing minutes of dressing in the dark, standing on a floor that feels less like a home and more like the slab of a morgue. The chill doesn't just stay in your feet, it travels, creeping up your shins and settling into your bones. A persistent, damp ache that reminds you, with every heartbeat, that you are awake and the world is cold. You step off the slate, which offers no relief, only a slightly less biting temperature than the air itself, and move toward the corner of the room where your clothes lie in a heap. There is no wardrobe here. There is no cedar chest filled with lavender sachets to keep the moths at bay, nor a valet stand to keep your doublet crisp and unwrinkled. Those are luxuries for the people inside the walls. The merchants, the guild masters, the people whose shadows are allowed to touch the shadows of others. For you, the clothing is purely functional, a barrier against the elements, and, more importantly, a legal requirement. You reach for the undertunic first. It is made of linen that was white perhaps 3 years ago, but has since yellowed into the color of old parchment. It is stiff with the cold, holding the shape in which it was discarded the night before. As you pull it over your head, the fabric feels like a sheet of ice against your skin, stealing what little warmth you had managed to hoard under your thin blanket. It smells of wood smoke and stale sweat, the distinct, earthy aroma of a garment that is washed only when the river thaws enough to scrub it against a rock. Then comes the hose. These are not the silk stockings of a courtier, nor the fine, dyed wool of a wealthy burgher. They are thick, scratchy, rough-spun wool that still holds the grease of the sheep. You sit on the edge of your straw mattress, wrestling the heavy fabric up your legs. It resists you. The wool catches on the dry, calloused skin of your heels, snagging and pulling. It itches instantly, a microscopic army of fibers digging into your calves, a sensation you stopped noticing years ago during the day, but one that always greets you sharply in the morning silence. You fumble with the points the laces use to tie the hose to the doublet. Your fingers are clumsy and stiff with the cold, making the simple act of tying a knot feel like a complex surgical procedure. You tie one. It slips. You tie it again, pulling it tight with a grunt of frustration, the leather lace biting into your waist. This is the glamour of history they forget to mention, the endless, repetitive struggle with drawstrings and knots in the semi-darkness. But these are just clothes. They are merely the base layer of a human being. What comes next is the transformation. You reach for the outer tunic. In the dim light of dawn filtering through the cracks in your shutters, the color is indistinguishable, but you know it well. In some provinces, it might be a garish mix of red and yellow, the colors of fools and outcasts. In others, it is a somber, muddy gray. But regardless of the dye, it is the addition sewn onto the chest that makes this garment heavy. You lift it up. It weighs more than it should, burdened by the significance of the symbol stitched onto the left breast. It is a crude piece of embroidery, perhaps a small ladder, or a gibbet, or simply a stylized head. It is the Harlequin's badge, the mark of Cain, the fabric warning label that screams to the world, "Do not approach." You pull the tunic on. The heavy wool settles onto your shoulders, and with it, the identity of the man you were, the man who might enjoy a joke, or the taste of an apple, or the warmth of a fire is suppressed, you are now the executioner. It is a strange psychological phenomenon. Putting on this tunic, you might think, looking back from the comfort of the future, that the executioner wore a hood to hide his identity. That is a fiction, a convenient lie told by storytellers who want to add mystery to the macabre. In reality, you almost never wear a hood. Why would you need to hide? Everyone knows who you are. The law requires them to know? The anonymity of a mask would imply that you are ashamed, or that you are a rogue agent acting outside the law, but you are not. You are a public servant. You are the hand of the king's justice. And paradoxically, the law requires you to be highly visible so that you can be avoided. This tunic is your quarantine flag. You smooth the rough fabric down over your stomach. The wool is coarse, woven from the discard pile of the loom, full of burrs and knots. It chafes against your neck. You fasten the belt, a wide strip of cracking leather that has seen better decades. It has no sheen, no polish. It is purely utilitarian, meant to hold the weight of your keys and the heavy iron tools you will soon be polishing. You cinch it tight, feeling it squeeze your empty stomach. A reminder that breakfast is a problem you have not yet solved. Standing there in the gloom, you run a hand over the symbol on your chest. The thread is raised and rough. This patch ensures your isolation. Because of this symbol, if you were to walk into a crowded market square right now, the crowd would part like the Red Sea. Not out of respect, but out of a profound, superstitious terror of physical contact. There is a belief, unspoken but deeply held, that your touch is contagious, that the bad luck, the sin, and the death that you deal in can be transferred like a plague. If your sleeve were to brush against a merchant's velvet cloak, he would likely burn the cloak. If your shadow were to fall across a basket of apples, the fishwife would toss them to the pigs. This tunic saves them the trouble of guessing. It creates a bubble of empty space around you, a radius of loneliness that you carry with you everywhere you go. You reach for your boots next. They are old, the leather stiffened by repeated soakings in mud and rain. You have stuffed them with straw to try and insulate your toes, but the straw has compacted over weeks into a hard, lumpy layer that offers little comfort. You shove your feet in, stomping down against the stone floor to force your heels into place. The leather creates a dull, hollow thud that echoes in the quiet room. You stand up fully now, dressed in the uniform of the outcast. You can feel the weight of the fabric dragging at your shoulders. It restricts your movement slightly, the thick layers making you feel lumbering and slow. You rotate your neck, hearing the vertebrae pop, trying to loosen the stiffness that the cold night air has hammered into your spine. The air in the cottage is still stagnant, holding the chill of the earth. You can see your breath in short, white puffs that vanish as quickly as they appear. You feel around on the table for your gloves. They are thick leather, stained and scarred from years of work, from ropes, from axe handles, like from shovels. You tuck them into your belt. You do not put them on yet. You want to feel the last few moments of your own skin touching the world before you encase your hands in the tools of your trade. There is no mirror in your cottage. Glass is expensive, and polished metal is a luxury for those who wish to admire themselves. You have no desire to see your reflection. You know what you look like. You look like the thing that mothers threaten their children with when they won't go to sleep. You look like the walking embodiment of the city's necessary evil. You take a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp wool and old leather that now surrounds you like a cloud. The sensory experience of being the executioner is largely the smell of wet animal fibers, the itch of low-quality clothing, and the constriction of a belt that divides your body in two. You are armored now, not against swords or arrows, but against society. You are ready to step out, but the cold is still inside you, and the rumble in your gut is becoming impossible to ignore. The tunic may mark you as a pariah, but it does not stop you from needing to eat. And that, in itself, is a complication you must face before the sun fully clears the horizon. The simple act of breaking your fast is about to become a reminder of just how far outside the circle of humanity you stand. The hunger that gnaws at your stomach is a dull, rhythmic ache. A physical reminder that your body requires maintenance, just like the iron tools of your trade. You move toward the rough-hewn table in the center of the room. The wood scarred and stained from generations of uninvited occupants who lived here before you. There is no warmth of a family breakfast here, no chatter of children or the comforting clatter of a busy household. There is only the damp silence of the cottage and the gray light filtering through the shutters, illuminating the dust motes that drift sluggishly in the stagnant air. Sitting on the table, resting on a wooden trencher that has seen better centuries, is your morning meal. It is a loaf of bread, if one can be charitable enough to call it that. To the eye, it is a dark, dense lump, the color of wet earth. To the touch, it is as unyielding as a river stone. You pick it up, feeling the cold, rough texture of the crust against your calloused palm. It has the weight of a weapon rather than food. This is not the soft, white manchet bread reserved for the nobility, nor even the respectable rye blend eaten by the merchants within the city walls. This is the executioner's portion, a culinary afterthought baked from the sweepings of the mill floor and the flour that was just starting to turn. You turn the loaf over in your hands, inspecting it with a critical, weary eye. It is stale. Of course it is stale. It was stale yesterday when you retrieved it, and the damp chill of your cottage has done nothing to improve its condition overnight. But the staleness is not merely a result of time. It is a result of social geometry. You did not buy this bread in the way a normal man buys bread. You did not walk into the bakery, smell the yeast rising in the ovens, exchange a pleasantry about the weather with the baker, and hand over a warm copper coin into his open palm. That simple human interaction is forbidden to you by custom and by law. The touch of your hand is considered a contagion. To the good citizens of the town, you are not just a man who performs a grim duty. You are infamy made flesh. Your very skin is thought to carry a metaphysical taint, a shadow that could spoil the milk and curdle the soul. So, you acquired this bread through the silent, humiliating ritual that defines your existence. You recall standing at the back of the bakery yesterday, well away from the other customers. The baker, a man with flour in his beard and fear in his eyes, did not look at you. He knew you were there. Your presence is a heaviness that changes the air in a room, but he refused to acknowledge you directly. He simply pointed to a specific spot on the wooden counter near the door. A spot reserved solely for you. There, sitting alone, separated from the fresh, steaming loaves destined for decent folk. Was this hard? Dark lump? You didn't hand him a coin? You placed your payment in a bowl of vinegar set aside for that purpose. The acid intended to wash away the sin of your money before the baker would deign to touch it. Or perhaps, depending on the local statutes of this particular miserable decade, you didn't pay at all. You simply exercised the droit de havage, the right to take a portion of goods from the market. It sounds like a privilege, a tax you levy on the town. But in reality, it is a curse, because you take what is given, and what is given is always the worst of the batch. The burnt crusts, the bruised apples, the meat that is one day away from rotting. They give it to you quickly, silently, just to make you leave. You sit on the three-legged stool, the wood creaking in protest under your weight, and prepare to eat. You draw a small knife from your belt, the metal dull and pitted. You attempt to slice the bread, but the crust resists. It requires a sawing motion, a physical effort that sends vibrations up your arm. Crumbs, hard and sharp as gravel, scatter across the table. You cannot eat this dry. To attempt to chew it as it is would be to invite a cracked tooth, and a dentist is certainly not going to put his fingers in the mouth of the executioner. So, you reach for the pitcher of small ale sitting nearby. It is weak, watery stuff. Barely fermented. Essentially just grain-flavored water that is slightly safer to drink than what runs in the river. You pour a measure into a battered pewter mug. You break off a chunk of the bread it snaps with a sound like a dry twig breaking and drop it into the ale. You watch it bob there, dark and unappealing. You must wait. You must sit in the silence and wait for the liquid to seep into the hardened dough, softening the barrier between sustenance and stone. This is the rhythm of your morning, waiting for the world to become palatable, knowing it never quite will. As the bread soaks, you look around the room. The walls are bare stone, weeping with moisture. There is no tapestry to hold back the chill, no rush mats on the floor to keep the cold from your feet. Your furniture is sparse: a table, a stool, a straw pallet in the corner. You own nothing of value because you have no one to leave it to, and no one would buy it from you if you died. The isolation is total. Even here, in the privacy of your own breakfast, the city's rejection sits at the table with you. You fish the sodden chunk of bread from the mug with your fingers. It is now a mushy, disintegrating mass, dripping with sour ale. You put it in your mouth. The texture is gritty, a mix of slime and sand. The taste is bland, dominated by the sourness of the ale and the vague, dusty flavor of old rye. There is no joy in this eating. It is purely mechanical. You chew. You swallow. You repeat. This is the fuel for the day ahead. This gray, flavorless sludge is what will power your arms when you have to swing the heavy iron later. It is what will keep you standing when you have to shovel the filth from the city's cesspits in the afternoon. It is a utilitarian intake of calories, stripped of all culinary pleasure. You think about the baker again as you chew. You wonder if he is eating a warm roll right now, sitting by a roaring fire, wiping melted butter from his chin. You wonder if he feels superior. You know he does. But you also know the secret that helps you sleep at night without you. His world collapses. Without you to clean the streets, to punish the thieves who would steal his flour, to enforce the laws that keep his shop safe, he would have no warm rolls. You are the foundation upon which his comfort is built, the sewer that carries away the waste so his life can remain clean. He despises you, yet he needs you more than he needs the priest. The thought brings a dry, cynical smile to your lips, but it doesn't make the bread taste any better. You finish the last of the soak bread, drinking the dregs of the ale to wash down the grit that clings to the back of your throat. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, feeling the rough stubble on your chin. The meal sits heavy in your stomach, a cold lump that matches the stone of the floor. There is no coffee to wake you, no sugar to give you a rush of energy. There is only the slow, heavy digestion of complex carbohydrates and the lingering taste of vinegar and shame. You brush the hard crumbs from the table onto the floor. Later, the mice will come for them. They are the only creatures in this world that do not judge you. They are the only guests you are allowed to host. You push the stool back. The scraping sound echoes loudly in the empty cottage. The sun is slightly higher now, though it offers no real warmth. The light hitting the small, barred window tells you it is time. The city is waking up. The merchants are opening their stalls. The noise of the crowd is beginning to swell beyond the walls. You stand up, feeling the stiffness in your joints. The brief respite of the morning is over. The silence of the cottage, oppressive as it is, was at least a sanctuary. Now, you must leave it. You must walk out into the world that fed you these scraps. You must navigate the streets where you are a necessary ghost. You move toward the heavy oak door. You pause for a moment. your hand hovering over the iron latch. You take a breath, inhaling the smell of damp stone and old smoke one last time before you trade it for the smells of the city. You brace yourself. The bread is in your belly, sitting like lead. The ale is in your blood. You are as ready as you will ever be. You lift the latch, and the door groans open, breaking the seal of your isolation. The morning air rushes to meet you, and it is not the crisp, invigorating breeze of a romanticized countryside. It is heavy, wet, and laden with the complex perfume of the Middle Ages. Even here, outside the city walls, the damp earth smells of rotting leaves, stagnant ditches, and the faint, acrid bite of wood smoke clinging to the low-hanging mist. You step over the threshold, your leather boots sinking immediately into the slurry of the path. There is no pavement here. There are no cobblestones leading to your door. The city does not waste its masonry on the path to the executioner's cottage. There is only mud thick, sucking clay that pulls at your heels with every step, a physical reminder of the drag and weight of your existence. You pull the heavy oak door shut behind you. It closes with a dull thud that sounds final, sealing away the meager comfort of your drafty home. You turn your back on it and face the road. The walk to the city gates is a daily ritual, a commute that carries a weight far heavier than the tools you might carry later. It is a mile or so to the main gate, a distance that allows the respectable citizens of the town to pretend you don't exist until they absolutely need you. The sun is just beginning to struggle over the horizon, a pale, watery disk that offers light but very little heat. It casts long, gray shadows across the fields, stretching out from the skeletal shapes of the leafless trees, and, of course, stretching out from you. You begin the trudge. Left foot, right foot. The mud squelches, a wet, rhythmic sound that marks time in the silence. Ahead, you see the arteries of commerce beginning to flow. The main road leading to the gate is already clogged with traffic. Even at this ungodly hour, the medieval world is awake. Carts piled high with turnips and sacks of grain creak and groan, their wooden wheels protesting the uneven ground. Drovers whistle and shout, navigating herds of sheep that bleat in a chaotic chorus. There are merchants in woolen cloaks, peasants with baskets of eggs, and itinerant monks walking with their heads bowed. It is a river of humanity, noisy, vibrant, and smelling of wet wool and unwashed bodies. And then, you merge into it. Or, rather, you attempt to. This is the moment where the reality of your station becomes a physical force. In any other life, in any other profession, you would simply be another body in the crowd, jostling for space, bumping shoulders, exchanging grunts or curses. But you are not another body. You are the Monsieur de Paris, the headsman, the master of high works. The reaction is instantaneous. It starts with a ripple, 20 yards ahead of you. A farmer looks up, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He sees the tunic, the drab, distinctive garment you pulled on earlier, perhaps marked with a sewn-on ladder or a specific colored patch, depending on the local laws of this particular duchy. His eyes widen, not with respect, but with a primal, superstitious recoil. He grabs the bridle of his donkey and yanks the beast violently to the left, driving it into the muddy ditch to clear the path. The silence spreads like a contagion. The shouting drovers swallow their words. The gossip between the milkmaids cuts off mid-sentence. The creaking of the cartwheels seems to grow louder because the human noise has evaporated. You keep walking. You do not look them in the eye. You learned long ago that making eye contact only increases their panic, and you have no desire to be the source of a scene this early in the morning. You simply stare straight ahead, fixing your gaze on the stone archway of the city gate in the distance. The crowd parts. It is a phenomenon that never ceases to feel strange. No matter how many years you have held this post, it is like you are a ship cutting through ice, As you advance, the sea of people splits, pressing themselves against the hedgerows, backing into the wet grass, squeezing against the sides of their wagons. They do not just step aside, they retreat. They shrink. The distance they keep is calculated. It is not just about avoiding a collision. It is about the breath of the executioner. It is about the shadow. You glance down at your feet as you walk. The morning sun is low behind you, casting your shadow far ahead. A dark, elongated silhouette stretching over the ruts of the road. You watch as a woman with a basket of apples sees your shadow reaching toward her boots. She gasps, a sharp intake of breath that you hear clearly in the unnatural quiet. And she leaps backward, dropping an apple into the muck. She does not reach for it. She would rather let the fruit rot in the dirt than risk her hand entering the space your shadow has just touched. To these people, you are not just a civil servant charged with a gruesome task. You are infamy incarnate. You are legally dead in the eyes of the church and the state. A non-person who exists in a gray purgatory. The superstition runs deeper than religion, deeper than law. They believe that bad luck radiates off you like heat off a stove. To touch you is to invite death. To touch your clothes is to court disease. To step in your shadow is to curse your own future. So, you walk in a bubble. A perfect, invisible sphere of isolation that travels with you. You can smell the fear. It has a distinct scent, sharp and sour, mixing with the smell of the nervous horses. You can hear the murmurs starting behind your back once you have passed. The sound of protective prayers being muttered. The rapid signing of the cross. Signum Crucis, a ward against the evil you represent. It is lonely. Yes. But if you are honest with yourself, as you place one heavy boot in front of the other, there is also a tedious boredom to it. It is exhausting to be a monster when all you really want is to get to work. Finish your shift, and go back to sleep. You don't feel like a harbinger of doom. You feel like a man with cold toes and an empty stomach, walking to a job that pays poorly and offers no holidays. You approach the gatehouse. The stone walls loom high above, stained with moss and soot. The portcullis is raised, looking like a jagged set of iron teeth waiting to drop. The guards are stationed there, leaning on their halberds, chatting and laughing, passing a wineskin between them. As you draw near, their laughter dies. These men are soldiers. They have seen blood. They have likely killed men in skirmishes or brawls. They are not faint-hearted peasants. And yet, the reaction is the same. They straighten up, their faces hardening into masks of professional indifference. They do not ask for a toll. You are exempt from the taxes of the city, one of the few perks of the job, though it feels less like a privilege and more like a refusal to accept your tainted coin. One guard, a man with a thick, scarred nose, steps back to ensure he does not accidentally brush against your sleeve as you pass under the archway. He looks through you, his gaze fixed on the horizon, refusing to acknowledge your humanity. You are invisible, yet you are the most conspicuous thing in the city. You pass into the shadow of the tunnel. The air instantly becomes colder, damper. The sounds of the open road are replaced by the hollow echo of your own footsteps on the paving stones here. Finally, there is stone underfoot. The smell changes, so too. The fresh, earthy rot of the fields is replaced by the concentrated stench of the city. Human waste in the gutters, stale beer, rendering fat, and the dense, trapped smoke of 1,000 hearths. You emerge on the other side of the wall, into the city proper. The buildings lean in over the narrow street, blocking out the sky, trapping the gloom. The noise of the waking town is deafening here, hammers ringing on anvils, merchants shouting their wares. dogs barking. But as you turn onto the street leading toward the castle district, the bubble moves with you. The silence travels down the street like a wave. You keep your head down. You wrap your arms around yourself, not just for warmth, but to keep your elbows in, to minimize your footprint, to make yourself as small as possible. You are a ghost haunting the morning commute. You are a contaminant in the bloodstream of the city. Ahead, the dark bulk of the citadel rises above the rooftops. The destination. The place where you can finally disappear into the dark, where you are not a pariah, but a necessary instrument. The walk is almost over. The silent gauntlet is nearly run. You focus on the rhythm of your boots on the cobblestones. Clack. 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 The sound of a man walking alone in a city of thousands. The clacking stops. The rhythm of your solitary march breaks as you come to a halt before the massive, iron-reinforced door of the citadel's lower keep. This is the end of the line. The barrier between the world of the living with its markets, fresh breezes, and open skies and the subterranean world that is your office. You stand there for a moment, the weight of the morning's rejection still clinging to your skin like a film of grease. The wood of the door is dark, stained by centuries of rain and neglect, bound by thick bands of black iron that are pitted with rust. It radiates a specific kind of cold, a deep, mineral chill that seems to push outward against the morning air. You reach to your belt, the heavy leather creaking as you shift your weight. There is a jangle of metal, a sound that usually makes people flinch if they hear it too close. But here, there is no one left to frighten. You lift the iron ring of keys. They are comically large, crude things. Forged not for elegance, but for brute durability. The metal is cold enough to burn your fingertips, sucking the warmth straight out of your hand. You select the largest key, a jagged tooth of iron that looks like it could break a man's jaw. You slide it into the keyhole. It doesn't glide. Nothing here is smooth. It grinds. You have to lean your shoulder into the wood, using your body weight to force the mechanism to yield. There is a screech of metal on metal, a vibration that travels up your arm and rattles your teeth, followed by a heavy, dull thunk as the bolt retracts. You push. The door groans open, swinging inward on hinges that haven't been properly oiled since the last king died. And then it hits you. The breath. Every executioner knows the breath. It is the exhale of the dungeon, a physical wall of air that rushes out to meet you the moment the seal is broken. It is not merely a bad smell, it is a complex, layered atmosphere that tastes of neglect. It hits your face with a clammy, moist weight. It smells of wet straw that has begun to rot, turning into a slick mash on the floor. It smells of unwashed bodies, of fear sweat that has soured over weeks of confinement. It smells of rust, of ancient mortar crumbling into dust, and of the overflowing waste buckets that you know you will have to deal with later. But mostly, it smells of the earth itself, a damp, cellar-like musk that reminds you that you are about to go underground, into a place where the soil presses in from all sides. You step across the threshold, and the temperature plummets. It is a shock to the system, instantly penetrating the thin wool of your tunic. Outside, the day might be warming up, the sun drying the dew on the grass. But in here, it is always November. It is always a wet, dark autumn evening, regardless of the season. The stone walls act as a refrigerator, trapping the cold of winter and holding onto it jealously through the height of summer. You pull the heavy door shut behind you. The darkness is absolute for a moment, pressing against your eyelids. You don't need to see, though. You know this space better than you know the lines on your own calloused palms. You know that 3 paces to the left is a niche in the wall, and in that niche is a flint and a pot of tallow. You work by touch. your fingers brushing against the wall. The stone is slimy. It's a phenomenon called weeping condensation from the humid air clinging to the cold rock, creating a permanent, slick sheen of moisture. It feels like the throat of a great beast. You find the flint. The spark is a violent, brief flash in the gloom, and then the wick catches. The flame doesn't roar to life. It struggles. The air down here is thick, heavy with moisture and low on circulation. The candle burns with a sputtering, yellow light, casting long, wavering shadows that seem to dance and twist against the curved walls. It produces a stream of greasy black smoke that drifts lazily upward, adding the scent of burnt animal fat to the stagnant cocktail of aromas. You pick up the light and begin the descent. The stairs are narrow, a spiral of stone steps worn into shallow bowls in the center by generations of feet guards, prisoners, and men like you. There is no handrail. You place your hand against the central pillar of the staircase. The stone smooth and freezing. To steady yourself, steady. Step, step, step. Your boots scrape against the grit. You have to walk carefully. The weeping walls drip onto the stairs, making the stone treacherous. A slip here means a tumble into the darkness, a broken neck that no one would discover for hours. And even if they did, they'd likely just leave you there, relieved they didn't have to pay you for the week. As you descend, the silence changes. Outside, silence is the absence of noise. Down here, the silence has a texture. It is heavy and muffled, suppressed by 10 feet of granite and earth. The sounds of the city, the church bells, the carts, the shouting merchants are gone, erased completely. In their place are the sounds of the dungeon. The dripping of water is constant. Plip, plip, plip. It echoes rhythmically, a metronome counting down the endless hours of your shift. Somewhere deep in the gloom, a rat scuttles over loose stones, the sound distinct and scratchy. From the cells further down, you might hear a rustle of straw, a cough, or the clanking of chains as a prisoner shifts in their sleep. But mostly, it is quiet. Contrary to what the troubadours sing or what the paintings show, the dungeon is not a place of constant screaming and drama. It is a place of waiting. It is a warehouse for human beings. Most of the people here aren't political masterminds or dangerous heretics. They are debtors, poachers, or drunks waiting for a magistrate who can't be bothered to show up. They are bored, cold, and miserable. Just like you. You continue down, the spiral twisting tighter. The air grows heavier with every step, compressing in your chest. You find yourself taking shallower breaths, trying not to inhale too deeply of the mold spores that coat the ceiling in fuzzy gray patches. You reach the bottom landing. The floor here is uneven flagstone, covered in a layer of filthy rushes, dried reeds that were meant to insulate the floor, but have long since turned into a compost of mud and refuse. They squelch softly under your boots. You hold the candle high, pushing back the gloom. This is your domain. It isn't a torture chamber filled with elaborate, cog-driven machines. That's a myth for the storybooks. Real torture is expensive, and the city council is cheap. Instead, the room is stark. There is a sturdy wooden table, scarred and stained dark. There are iron rings set into the walls, and there is the rack of tools. This is the reality of your descent. You aren't here to be a villain. You aren't here to twirl a mustache and inflict pain for pleasure. You are here to work. You are a tradesman, and this is your workshop. But unlike a carpenter who smells of pine shavings and sawdust, or a baker who smells of yeast and warmth, your workshop smells of despair and mildew. You walk to the center of the room and set the candle down on the table. The light flickers, illuminating the corners of the room where the spiders have built sprawling, Dusty empires. You feel the dampness seeping through the leather of your boots, chilling your toes. You stand there for a moment, letting your eyes fully adjust. The gloom is gray and grainy. You feel the isolation wrapping around you tighter than it did on the street. Up there, you were ignored. Down here, you are buried. You are a ghost haunting a tomb while you are still alive. Your gaze drifts to the wall where your equipment hangs. The iron implements. The blades, the brands, the shackles. In the damp air of this underground pit, metal behaves badly. It wants to return to the earth. It wants to rust. You sigh, a sound that is swallowed instantly by the heavy air. The walk is done. The descent is over. Now, the real drudgery begins. You roll up your sleeves, exposing your pale arms to the biting cold, and turn toward the tools that need your attention. They are dull. They are spotted with orange oxidation, and they are waiting for you. You reach out and wrap your fingers around the haft of the heading axe. The wood is old, smoothed by the grip of your father and his father before him, absorbing the oils of 3 generations of working hands, until the oak feels more like polished stone than timber. It is heavy, absurdly heavy, a weight that pulls your shoulder down the moment you lift it from the rack. But the weight is necessary. Gravity does half the work. But today, gravity is not your concern. Oxidation is... You hoist the iron head onto the sturdy wooden workbench. The table is scarred with 1,000 deep scratches and stained black with oil and other older fluids that have soaked into the grain over the decades. The dungeon air is thick with moisture. You can feel it on your skin. A clammy, pervasive dampness that seeps through the stone walls and settles on everything. Down here, below the waterline of the city's moat, the air doesn't circulate. It stagnates. And that moisture is the mortal enemy of your trade. If you were a knight, you would have a squire to polish your armor. If you were a lord, you would have servants to maintain your estate. But you are the executioner, and you have no assistants. You are the sole custodian of the town's grim machinery, and iron left alone in this dripping cellar turns orange and brittle within days. You pick up a rag, stiff with old grease and grime, and dip it into a pot of sand mixed with vinegar. This is the glamour of your profession. This is the dark, terrifying reality that the townspeople whisper about a man standing alone in the dark. Scrubbing rust spots off a piece of metal with a rag full of grit. You begin to scrub. The sound is small and scratching, a rhythmic shh, 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 that barely travels past the wooden beams of the ceiling. It is tedious, mindless work. You focus on a patch of orange bloom near the blade's edge. You press down, the sand biting into the metal, your thumb moving in small, tight circles. You do this for minutes that stretch into hours. The cold of the dungeon seems to radiate up through the soles of your boots, numbing your toes. But your upper body grows warm with the exertion. There is a meditative quality to it. If you can detach your mind from the boredom, you aren't thinking about justice, or sin, or the faces of the condemned. You are thinking about chemistry. Though you don't know the word for it, you are fighting the natural decay of the world. You are trying to keep something permanent in a place where everything rots. Once the surface rust is scoured away, revealing the dull gray iron beneath, the real work begins. Sharpening. A dull blade is a disaster. The townspeople think of you as a brute, a monster who enjoys pain. But they don't understand that your greatest fear is causing unnecessary suffering. Not out of kindness, necessarily, but out of self-preservation. If the axe is dull, it bounces. It hacks. It takes 2 swings, or 3. And if it takes 3 swings, the crowd turns. The mob that gathers to cheer the execution will just as quickly storm the scaffold and tear you apart if you bungle the job. A sharp blade is your insurance policy. You pull the large whetstone closer. It is a slab of gray sandstone, quarried from the riverbed, heavy and cold. You splash a little water onto it from a bucket that has been sitting in the corner. A bucket with a thin film of dust on the surface. You take the heavy iron head in both hands. Bracing your feet on the flagstones, you angle the metal against the stone. Crap. The sound is loud in the confined space. It is a harsh, grating noise that sets your teeth on edge, echoing off the wet walls. Scrappy! You lift, adjust the angle by a fraction of an inch, and push again. Slap. This is the soundtrack of your morning. It is a slow, rhythmic grinding that eventually pushes all other thoughts out of your head. There is only the steel, the stone, and the friction between them. You watch the water on the stone turn gray as it mixes with the metal filings. You watch the sludge drip down the side of the bench. Your shoulders begin to burn. The axe head weighs nearly 10 pounds, and holding it at a precise angle while applying pressure requires a specific, static strength that is exhausting in a way that swinging it never is. Your triceps tremble. Your lower back aches from hunching over the bench. But you cannot stop. You have to maintain the bevel. If you change the angle now, you'll ruin the edge. And you'll have to start all over again. The smell of the room changes as you work. The musty, moldy scent of the dungeon is overtaken by the smell of hot iron and wet stone, a metallic, sharp tang that tastes like blood in the back of your throat. It is the smell of industry, stripped of all its romance. After an eternity of grinding, you test the edge. You run the pad of your thumb perpendicular to the blade, never along it feeling for the burr, the tiny wire of metal that curls over the edge when it is truly sharp. It's there, but it's rough. You switch to a finer stone. The sound changes. It becomes a higher-pitched hiss. Hiss, hiss. Hiss, hiss. It is almost hypnotic. Your eyes lose focus, staring at the gray slurry on the stone, your body rocking back and forth with the motion of the work. You are a machine servicing a machine. This is the part of history the chronicles leave out. They tell of the swift stroke of the sword or the falling of the axe. They do not tell of the 4 hours the executioner spent on a Tuesday morning with a cramp in his hand, trying to get a nick out of the blade because he accidentally bumped it against the doorframe 3 weeks ago. Finally, the axe is done. But you are not. You turn to the sword of justice. It is a beautiful thing. Unlike the brutish axe, it is double-edged, flat-tipped, etched with symbols of Christ and the Virgin Mary, intended to sanctify the violence it commits. It belongs to the city, not you. You are merely its borrower. If you let it rust, the magistrates will dock your pay, or worse, fine you. And you have no money to pay fines. The sword requires even more care. It is tempered steel, harder than the axe, and it resists the stone. It sings when you sharpen it, a ringing vibration that travels up your arms and settles in your elbows. You polish the flat of the blade with pumice powder and oil until you can see your own tired, dirt-streaked face reflected in the steel. You look at your reflection, the hollow eyes, the stubble, the grime, and the reflection looks back, distorted by the curve of the metal. And then there are the chains. You move to the corner where the shackles and manacles are piled like a nest of iron snakes. These are the tools of the dungeon proper. They don't need to be sharp. They need to move. A seized lock means you have to break it, and smiths are expensive. You sit on a low, three-legged stool, your knees cracking as you descend. You pick up a set of leg irons. They are cold enough to burn your skin. The hinges are stiff, clogged with the dungeon's damp decay. You reach for the jar of tallow. It is rendered animal fat, perhaps sheep or pig, and it has gone rancid. The smell is heavy and cloying, a sweet, rotting stench that sticks to the roof of your mouth. You scoop out a glob of the white, waxy grease with your fingers. It feels slick and revolting, coating your skin in a layer of filth that will take days to fully scrub away. You work the grease into the hinges. You work the key in the lock. Click, clack, click, clack. You twist it back and forth, feeling the mechanism loosen, hearing the grit grind away inside the keyhole. You do this for every set of chains, every padlock, every hinge on the rack, every pulley on the strappado. Your hands are black now. Grease has worked its way under your fingernails, into the calluses of your palms, into the pores of your wrists. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, inadvertently leaving a smear of black grease across your temple like a war mark. The monotony is crushing. There is no conversation here, no hustle and bustle of the marketplace, no bird song, just the drip of water, the scritch-scratch of cleaning, the clanking of chains. It is a sensory deprivation tank of gray stone and gray labor. You pause for a moment, resting your hands on your knees. You look around the room. It is cleaner than it was. The metal gleams dully in the low light. The tools are ready. They are ready to do terrible things. But for now, they are just objects. Cold, heavy, indifferent objects that require your constant servitude to keep from returning to the earth as rust. Your stomach rumbles, a deep, hollow sound that echoes in the quiet room, reminding you that the crust of bread you ate hours ago is long gone. The cold has burned through your energy reserves. The labor has left you hollowed out. You stand up, your joints popping, and wipe your hands on the front of your leather apron. It doesn't help much. It just spreads the grease around. You need more than dry bread. You need something substantial. But you cannot buy food. Not really. You have no coins that a merchant would touch without crossing themselves and spitting on the ground. But you have rights. Or rather, you have customs. Ancient, unspoken agreements that allow you to survive on the fringes of the society that rejects you. You sigh, the breath pluming white in the damp air. You look at the heavy oak door that leads up to the sunlight. You don't want to go out there. You prefer the honest, quiet hostility of the cold iron to the active, burning hostility of the people. But a man has to eat. You grab a heavy sack from the hook by the door. It is coarse burlap, stained and rough. You adjust your tunic, ensuring the symbol of your office is visible. Though it hardly matters, they will know you by your walk, by your smell, and by the silence that falls when you approach. You push open the door and begin the climb up the spiral stairs, leaving the clean, sharp scent of the dungeon for the chaotic, overwhelming stench of the city above. You are going to collect your tax. The sunlight hits you like a physical blow, a harsh, blinding white after the stagnant, heavy gloom of the lower levels. You blink rapidly, your pupils struggling to contract against the sudden glare of the midday sun. And for a moment, the world is nothing but a wash of overexposed gray stone and pale sky. But as your vision clears, the other senses are immediately assaulted. Down in the dark, the air was still dead, really smelling of wet stone, old iron, and of fear. Up here, the air is alive, and then it is aggressive. It is a thick, invisible soup of wood smoke. Unwashed wool, roasting meat, animal dung, and the press of 1,000 bodies sweating in the humidity. You step out of the heavy citadel doors and into the noise. It is a roar, a chaotic ocean of shouting merchants, rattling cartwheels, barking dogs, and the shrieking of children playing in the muck. But then, a strange phenomenon occurs, one that you have experienced every single time you have entered this square, yet one that never ceases to make your stomach feel heavy and cold. As you take your first step onto the cobblestones, the noise changes. It doesn't stop. The market is too vast for that, but the roar directly in front of you simply evaporates. It is like a bubble of silence that travels with you, a moving vacuum where laughter dies and conversations are severed mid-sentence. You walk forward, your boots sinking slightly into the mixture of straw and mud that coats the street. And the crowd parts. They do not shove. They do not scramble. They simply drift away. Fluidly, instinctively, like a shoal of fish avoiding a shark. They don't look at you. That is the most striking part. Hundreds of eyes are suddenly fascinated by the ground, or a distant rooftop, or the stitching on their own sleeves. To make eye contact with you is to invite bad luck, or perhaps to remind themselves that the arm that ends lives is attached to a man, not a monster. You adjust the rough burlap sack slung over your shoulder. It is empty now, hanging limp and scratchy against your tunic. But the purpose of this walk is to fill it. You are here to collect your due. You might think that being a hired killer for the state would pay well. And in terms of coin, it does. You have a pouch of silver tucked into your belt. More money than the weavers or the ditch diggers earn in a month. But the irony, the cruel joke of your existence, is that the money is useless here. You feel the weight of the coins against your hip, cold and hard, but you cannot spend them. To the people of this town, the money in your pocket is blood money. It is cursed. It has been touched by death. If you were to walk up to the alewife and place a silver groat on the counter, she would not touch it. If she did, she would have to scour her hands with vinegar and ash. If you tried to hand a copper penny to the baker, he would recoil as if you had offered him a viper. They would rather give away their goods for free than accept the metal that has been warmed by your hand. And so, the law has created a workaround, a system that humbles you even as it feeds you. The droit de Havage, the right of Havage. You approach the first stall. It is a baker's stand, a wooden trestle groaning under the weight of round, crusty loaves. The smell is intoxicating warm yeast and toasted flour, a sharp contrast to the damp mildew of your own home. The baker is a large man, red-faced and loud, usually shouting his prices to the heavens. But as your shadow falls across his table, he becomes very busy arranging a stack of small rolls. He turns his back to you, wiping his hands on his apron, staring resolutely at the wall behind him. He knows you are there. He can hear the distinctive heavy tread of your boots. But he will not acknowledge you. You do not speak. To speak would be a breach of the silent contract. You simply reach out. Your hand, rough and stained with the charcoal you used to clean the tools earlier, hovers over the bread. By law, you are permitted to take what you can span with your hands, or in some towns, what you can scoop up with a marked ladle. Here, the custom is the marked loaf. You see a loaf that has been placed slightly apart from the others. It is set upside down. A subtle signal. A loaf turned on its head is bad luck for a normal customer. A sign of the executioner. It is yours. You pick it up. The crust is thick and hard. Cool to the touch, it is not the fresh, hot bread reserved for the mayor, but yesterday's bake. It is dense and heavy. You slide it into your sack. The baker does not turn around. You walk away, and only when you are 3 stalls down do you hear his voice boom out again. Selling his wares to the clean people, you continue your drift through the market. The mud sucks at your heels with a wet, squelching sound that seems loud in the bubble of silence surrounding you. You approach a vegetable cart. The merchant here is an old woman with hands gnarled like tree roots. She is measuring out onions for a young mother. As you approach, the transaction freezes. The young mother grabs her child's hand and pulls him tight against her skirts, stepping back into the shadows of an awning. The old woman stops moving. She stares at her onions. You reach out again. This time, It is the Havage in its truest form. You spread your fingers wide. You are allowed to take what you can grasp in one scoop. You plunge your hand into a pile of carrots and turnips. The roots are cold and damp, covered in clumps of dark earth that crumble under your fingertips. You grab 2 large turnips and a handful of carrots. Their orange skins dull under the dirt. It feels like theft. It always feels like theft. Your heart beats a slow, rhythmic thud of shame against your ribs, even though you have a legal scroll back in your cottage that says this is your right. You are the king's justice, yet you are scavenging like a rat. You drop the vegetables into the sack. They clatter against the hard bread. The old woman lets out a breath, a small cloud of vapor in the chill air, but she says nothing. You move on. The smells of the market mix and churn-rotting cabbage leaves trampled into the gutter. The metallic tang of fresh fish, the heavy, oily scent of roasting pork. You stop at a butcher's block. This is the only place where the merchant looks at you. The butcher, a man with forearms as thick as thighs, meets your gaze. There is a strange, grim solidarity here. He deals in flesh and bone, just as you do. He severs joints and drains blood, just as you do. But he is a respectable tradesman, and you are a pariah. He nods. Once. Imperceptibly. He points with his knife to a slab of flank steak sitting on a piece of oilcloth. It is a rough cut, full of gristle, the kind of meat that would take hours of boiling to make tender. It is the dog's portion. It is yours. You pick up the cold, slick meat, feeling the fat grease coat your fingers. You wrap it in a scrap of cloth from your pocket and add it to the sack. The weight on your shoulder is growing, a physical burden that matches the heaviness in your chest. You walk past the cloth merchants, the spice traders, the potters. You do not stop there. You have no need for silk or cinnamon. And even if you did, the tax only applies to the necessities of life. Food and candle wax. You cannot just take a bolt of velvet. And so you walk, a gray figure in a colorful world, a ghost that everyone sees but no one acknowledges. You pass a group of children playing a game with knucklebones near the fountain. As your shadow stretches over them, they freeze. One little girl looks up, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of terror and curiosity. She starts to point, but her older brother slaps her hand down and hisses at her to be quiet. They hold their breath until you pass. You keep your eyes forward, fixing your gaze on the city gates in the distance. You have learned that it is easier not to look at the faces. If you don't look, you don't see the disgust. If you don't look, you can pretend you are just a man taking a walk, not a contagion passing through the bloodstream of the city. The sack bumps against your hip, heavy and awkward. You have your day's wages, a stale loaf, some dirty roots, a tough piece of meat. It is enough to keep you alive, enough to fuel the strength you need to swing the sword or turn the wheel. But as you weave through the last of the stalls, leaving the vibrant chaos of the market behind, the hollow feeling in your stomach has nothing to do with hunger. You have collected your tax, but you have paid for it with your humanity. The noise of the market begins to fade behind you, replaced by the chaotic, wet sounds of the riverside slums. You might think that with your shopping done, you could return to the solitude of your cottage, to sit by the fire and boil your turnips in peace. But the city is not done with you yet. The sack of food is merely sustenance for the labor to come. You are not just the executioner, you are the city's janitor, the keeper of its filthiest secrets. The air changes again. The smell of roasting meat and wood smoke is gone, replaced by something sharper, fouler. Something that makes your eyes water and your throat constrict. You tighten the grip on your sack and turn down a narrow, darkened alleyway. You are heading toward the Cesspits, where the true drudgery of your afternoon awaits. The heavy wooden soles of your boots slap against the wet cobblestones as you move deeper into the alley, leaving the noise of the market behind you. The air here changes texture. It ceases to be the crisp, wood smoke-scented breeze that drifts over the city walls and becomes something thick, stationary, and warm. It is a physical weight against your face, a cloying, heavy dampness that tastes of copper and rot. You don't need to look up to know where you are. You can feel it in the back of your throat. You have arrived at the rear of the tannery district, where the narrow lanes slope downward into the city's drainage sinks. This is your afternoon. This is the glamour of your office. Most people, when they imagine your life, like picture the dramatic silhouette on the scaffold. They imagine the hush of the crowd, the glint of the axe, the terrible power you hold over life and death. They think of you as a figure of dark romance or terrifying authority. But they rarely think about the Tuesday afternoons. They don't think about the municipal duties that come bundled with the executioner's hood. You stop before a low, timber-framed structure that sags precariously over a deep, stone-lined pit. There is a shovel leaning against the wall you shovel. It is a heavy thing, the handle polished smooth by years of your own calloused grip, the iron head crusted with the gray, dried remnants of last week's labor. You set down your sack of collected food scraps on a relatively dry patch of earth, though nothing here is truly dry. Everything is slick with a microscopic film of moisture. You take the shovel. The wood is cold and familiar. This is the part of the job description that the town council prefers not to discuss in polite company. In the eyes of the law and the church, you are unclean. You shed blood. You touch the dead. You are spiritually contaminated. And because medieval logic is a rigid and circular thing, if you are already unclean, you are the perfect candidate to handle the physical uncleanliness of the city. Why hire a separate man to muck out the cesspits when the executioner is already damned? It is a brutally efficient form of municipal budgeting. You are not just the town's killer, you are its janitor. You step up to the edge of the pit. The smell is no longer a scent, it is an environment. It wraps around you, seeping into the wool of your tunic, finding its way into your hair. But you don't gag. You stopped gagging years ago. Now it is just boring. It is just another dull sensory input, like the gray sky or the rough stone. You begin to work. The motion is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. You drive the iron spade into the thick, dark mire. There is a sound, a wet, sucking squelch as the mud resists. Holding onto the metal, you have to put your back into it, engaging the muscles of your legs and your lower spine to break the suction. You lift. The load is incredibly heavy. This is not loose soil or dry sand. It is dense, waterlogged waste. A mixture of ash, offal, straw, and night soil that is compacted into a clay-like sludge. You twist your torso. You heave the load into the waiting cart. It lands with a heavy, flat thud. Then you turn back. You drive the shovel down. You push. You lift. You twist. You throw. Thud. There is a strange, meditative quality to it. The rest of the city is bustling with commerce and conversation. Blacksmiths are hammering. Merchants are haggling. Children are playing. But here, in the shadow of the back alleys, there is only the sound of your breathing and the wet slap of the shovel. You are completely alone. No one comes down this alley while you're working. Even the stray cats give you a wide berth. You are performing a vital service. Really, without you, the pits would overflow. The streets would become impassable. Disease, which is already a constant companion in this time, would run rampant. You are saving lives just as surely as you are tasked to end them. But there is no gratitude for this. If a merchant were to see you right now, knee-deep in the city's refuse, he wouldn't think of sanitation. He would just see a dirty man doing a dirty job, confirming everything he already believes about your station in life. You pause for a moment to wipe the sweat from your forehead, careful to use the back of your wrist, avoiding the grime on your hands. Your shoulders ache. It is a dull, burning fatigue that settles deep in the joints. The shovel feels heavier with every scoop, as if the iron itself is soaking up the weariness of the afternoon. You look at the cart. It is only half full. You resume the rhythm. Dig. Squelch, lift, twist, throw. The texture of the work changes as you go deeper. You hit pockets of straw that tangle the blade. You strike hidden stones that jar your elbows, sending a shock of vibration up your arms. You find things that people have thrown away, hiding them in the muck-broken pottery. Rags. Bones. It is the archaeology of the unwanted. Just like you. These things have been cast aside, removed from the sight of the decent folk. The sky above the narrow gap of the alley rooftops begins to shift from the stark white of midday to a bruised, cloudy gray. A light drizzle begins to fall. It doesn't wash anything away. It just makes the cobblestones slippery and the air even colder. The rain mixes with the sweat on your neck, sending a shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the damp. Pervasive chill of the era. You might think that the worst part of this is the disgust, but the disgust fades. The worst part is the silence. It is the isolation. You are a man capable of speech, of thought, of feeling, yet you spend your days interacting with nothing but dead weight, whether it be a lifeless body or a mound of earth. You are starved for a voice that isn't your own, but the only sound is the rain hissing against the contents of the cart. Your boots are heavy, caked in inches of gray mud. Every step requires a deliberate effort. You can feel the cold seeping through the leather, numbing your toes. You wonder, idly, what the baker is doing right now. Probably pulling warm loaves from the oven. The smell of yeast and toasted flour filling his shop. You wonder what the blacksmith is doing. Probably drinking a cup of ale by the heat of his forge. You are here. Lift, twist, throw. The cart is finally full. The horse that pulls it, a sway-backed, indifferent creature that belongs to the municipality, shifts its weight and snorts, its breath pluming in the damp air. Even the horse seems resigned to this duty. You lean the shovel against the wall and stretch your back, hearing the vertebrae pop one by one. Your hands are locked into claws, molded to the shape of the handle. It takes a moment to flex them, to force the fingers to straighten. You look down at yourself. Your tunic is splattered with dark specks. Your leggings are soaked to the knees. The symbol sewn onto your chest, the mark of your trade, is obscured by the filth. But it doesn't matter. The smell announces you louder than any badge could. You take hold of the horse's bridle. You have to lead the cart out of the city, to the dumping grounds far beyond the walls, and then return the cart to the stables. It is a long walk, a silent walk. As you guide the cart out of the alley, emerging back into the periphery of the streets, you see people recoil. A woman carrying a basket of laundry spots you and immediately presses herself flat against a wall, turning her face away, covering her nose and mouth with her apron. She isn't just avoiding the smell of the cart, she is avoiding the bad luck of your shadow. She is avoiding the contagion of your existence. You keep your eyes forward. You don't look at her. You don't apologize. You just keep walking, the heavy wooden wheels of the cart grinding behind you, crushing the gravel. By the time you return the cart and the shovel, the afternoon is worn on, heavy and gray. The physical labor has left you drained, your energy spent on moving the city's waste. You want nothing more than to go back to your cottage, to sit, to perhaps find enough water to scrub the day from your skin. But your day is not over. As you wipe your hands on a rag that is hardly cleaner than your skin, you hear a sound echoing from the lower market squares. It is a sharp, chaotic noise, barking, snarling, a chorus of yaps and howls. You sigh, a long exhalation that rattles in your chest. The council has been complaining about the strays again, the packs of wild dogs that roam the butcher's quarter, stealing meat and snapping at the ankles of horses. They are a nuisance. They are dangerous. And like the waste in the pits, they are a problem that requires a violent, unpleasant solution. And there is only one man in the city legally permitted to solve it. You drop the rag, you adjust your belt, you turn away from the quiet of the stables and head toward the noise. The shovel is done. Now, the chase begins. The noise hits you before the smell does. A cacophony of yaps, snarls, and guttural growls that cuts through the low hum of the afternoon market. You adjust the heavy burlap sack slung over your left shoulder and tighten your grip on the long wooden pole in your right hand. It is a simple tool, polished smooth by years of friction against your calloused palm, ending in a loop of thick, frayed rope. It is not the noble steel of a headsman's sword, nor is it the terrifying iron of the branding rod. It is a dog catcher's pole, and for the next few hours, it is the only symbol of authority you possess. You step away from the edge of the cesspit, leaving the shovel behind, but the mud follows you. It clings to your boots, thick and clay-like, adding a pound of weight to every step you take. In this city, the streets are not paved with gold, nor even with decent stone. They are paved with a mixture of rain, earth, and the refuse you were just shoveling, churned into a paste that threatens to suck the shoes right off your feet. And through this mire, you are expected to run. You spot your first target near the butcher's stall. It is a scrawny thing, a mongrel with patchy, matted fur the color of old straw. It is tugging violently at a strip of gristle that the butcher has swept into the gutter, growling at a larger black dog that circles it with hungry eyes. These are not the loyal hounds of the hunt, nor the pampered lapdogs of the nobility that sit on velvet cushions in the high keep. These are the city's scavengers, a feral population that multiplies in the shadows of the alleys, living on trash and rats. They are pests, pure and simple, carriers of fleas and sickness, and because they are unwanted, they fall under your jurisdiction. You move slowly at first. The trick, you have learned, is not to startle them until you are within range. If you run too soon, they will scatter into the labyrinth of narrow lanes where your broad shoulders cannot follow. You are a large man, built for heavy, static work, swinging, lifting, holding. You are not built for agility. You are not built to chase terriers through obstacle courses of barrels and cartwheels. The butcher looks up and sees you. His expression shifts instantly. A moment ago, he was shouting curses at the dogs, wishing them dead. Now, seeing you approaching the executioner, the pariah, he recoils. He wipes his hands on his apron and takes a definitive step back into his shop, unwilling to be near you even if you are there to solve his problem. He doesn't nod. He doesn't say thank you. He just watches with that familiar mix of fear and disgust. You lunge. The wooden pole extends, the rope loop hovering for a split second over the mongrel's head. But the dog is fast. It has survived this long by being faster than the kicks of merchants and the stones of street urchins. It twists with a liquid agility, the rope grazing its ear, and snaps its jaws at the wood. With a sharp yelp, it abandons the gristle and darts between your legs. You stumble. Your heavy boot slides on a slick patch of offal. You flail your arms to keep your balance, the heavy sack swinging wildly, threatening to pull you down into the muck. You manage to stay upright, but just barely. From the safety of the open windows above, you hear a laugh. It's a woman's laugh, sharp and mocking. You don't look up. You know what you look like. You are the terrifying hand of justice, the man who knows the secrets of the dungeon. The figure used to frighten children into behaving. And here you are by slipping in mud, outsmarted by a dog with 3 good legs. You grit your teeth and turn. The chase is on. You jog heavily down the lane, your breath clouding in the damp air. The physical sensation of this work is entirely different from the dungeon. Down there, the air is still and stifling. Here, the cold wind whips at your face, stinging your cheeks, while sweat begins to trickle down your back under the heavy wool of your tunic. It is a miserable combination of freezing and overheating. The tunic itches. The belt chafes. The smell of the unwashed dog you're chasing mixes with the lingering scent of the cesspit on your clothes, creating a personal atmosphere of absolute foulness. You corner the animal against a stack of rotting crates behind a tanner's yard. The smell here is acrid urine and harsh chemicals used to cure leather. The dog bares its teeth, a low rumble vibrating in its throat. This is the dangerous part. You might assume that the executions are the dangerous part of your trade, but a man in irons is predictable. A cornered, feral dog is a chaotic flurry of teeth and claws. If it bites you, the wound will likely fester. There are no antibiotics in your world. A deep bite on the calf from a filthy mouth could mean a fever within days, and the grave within a week. It is a lethal risk for a task that pays in copper pennies. You ready the pole again? You have to be precise. You feign a lunge to the left, and when the dog snaps, you sweep the loop over its head from the right. You pull the rope taut. The struggle is immediate and violent. The pole vibrates in your hands as the animal thrashes, a frantic dead weight at the end of the stick. You have to endure the noise, the high-pitched yelping that echoes off the stone walls, drawing more attention, more eyes watching the spectacle. You maneuver the animal toward the cage on your small handcart. You have to handle the creature without touching it, manipulating the pole until you can shove the beast inside and slam the iron grate shut. The metal clangs with a finality that matches the ringing in your ears. 1 down. Only about a dozen more to go before the sun sets. This is the reality of your privileges. In many medieval charters, the executioner is granted the right to all stray dogs, cats, and hogs found wandering the streets. It sounds like a bizarre legal footnote, but it is a rigid obligation. The city council demands the streets be kept clear, but they consider the act of catching and disposing of these animals to be beneath the dignity of a proper citizen. It is infamous work. So, it falls to the man who is already infamous. You are the city's waste management system, for both moral and physical refuse. You drag the cart through the deepening mud. The wheels are uneven, one of them squeaking rhythmically, a piercing sound that drills into your headache. Squeak. Thud. Squeak. Thud. You scan the alleys. You see a pack of strays fighting over a dead rat near the church steps. You sigh, the breath leaving you in a long, weary plume of white vapor. Your shoulders ache from the tension of the pole. Your legs burn from the heavy, uneven footing. People part for you, but not out of respect for your hard work. They press themselves flat against the walls to avoid the cart. They pull their cloaks tight over their faces to filter out the air you occupy. A group of children stops playing ball to stare. One of them, a boy of about 10, picks up a stone. He weighs it in his hand, looking at the dogs in the cart, then at you. He doesn't throw it, not while you're looking, but the threat hangs there. To him, you are just another stray, something dangerous and dirty that wanders the streets, frightening the normal people. You ignore him. You have to. You lower your head and push the cart toward the pack by the church. The rain begins to fall harder now, turning the dampness into a steady, freezing drizzle. It soaks through your hood instantly, plastering the wool to your skull. Cold water drips down your neck, tracing an icy line down your spine, making you shiver uncontrollably. You spend the next 2 hours in this rhythm spot. Chase, slip, struggle, cage. Your hands are raw from the wet wood of the pole. Your boots are heavy blocks of clay. The sky turns from a bruised gray to a deep, oppressive charcoal. The market stalls are beginning to pack up. The noise of commerce is dying down, replaced by the sound of rain hissing on the cobblestones and the pathetic whining of the animals in your cart. You are exhausted in a way that goes beyond simple tiredness. It is a soul-deep weariness, born of being the boogeyman who also has to take out the trash. You have cleared the main thoroughfares. You have fulfilled your contract. You have justified your existence in the city for another day. As you turn the cart to head toward the city gates, toward the place where you must dispose of your catch, a warm, golden light spills out onto the wet street. It cuts through the gloom, reflecting beautifully in the puddles you've been trudging through. It is the window of the alehouse, Through the thick, distorted glass, you can see the shapes of men sitting on benches. You can see the flicker of a roaring hearth fire, casting dancing shadows on the walls. You can almost smell the roasting meat and the yeasty, sour tang of fresh ale. You can imagine the heat of the fire drying your soaked tunic, the feeling of a clay mug warming your frozen fingers, the dull roar of conversation that signifies community and belonging. You stop the cart. You stand there in the rain, staring at the window. The water drips from the end of your nose. Your stomach gives a hollow, painful cramp, reminding you that your breakfast of stale crust was a lifetime ago. You have the coins in your pouch, meager earnings, but enough for a pint. You have the thirst. You have the need. But you know the law. You know it as well as you know the weight of the axe. The tavern is for the public. You are the executioner. You are legally forbidden to cross that threshold. If you were to open that door, the silence that would fall over the room would be colder than the rain running down your back. The landlord would smash the mug you drank from. The patrons would leave. You linger for a second longer, watching a man inside laugh and clap another on the back. The warmth is so close you feel you could reach out and touch it, but it is an entire world away. You grip the handles of the cart, your knuckles white. You turn your head away from the light. You push the cart forward, the squeaky wheel groaning in protest, moving away from the warmth and toward the darkening gloom of the church square. The bells are about to ring for vespers, and you have one more place to be where you are not wanted. The bells you heard ringing a moment ago were a warning, a dull bronze resonance vibrating through the soles of your feet. But the sky above you offers a warning of a different kind. The low, heavy clouds that have been threatening to break all afternoon finally surrender their burden. It begins not with a dramatic storm, but with a miserable, icy drizzle, the kind of rain that doesn't wash things clean, but simply turns the accumulated grime of the city into a slick, treacherous paste. You pull the rough wool of your hood tighter around your face. The fabric is already damp, smelling faintly of the wet dog you were chasing only an hour ago, mixed with the older, deeper sense of mildew and wood smoke that seem permanently woven into the fibers of your tunic. The rain ticks against the cobblestones, a rhythmic, hissing percussion that underscores the silence surrounding you. As the daylight begins to fail, turning the slate-gray sky into a bruised purple, the rest of the city seeks shelter. You watch them scurry, men with leather aprons thrown over their heads, women clutching baskets of damp linen, children splashing through puddles. They all have a destination. They all have a hearth. You, however, are just pausing. You stop walking because the fatigue in your legs has become a heavy, leaden weight, pulling at your hamstrings and settling deep in your lower back. You are standing beneath the dripping eaves of a timber-framed building, pressing your shoulder against the cold, wet daub to let a cart rumble past. The wheel sprays mud inches from your shins. You don't move. There is nowhere dry to go. Directly across the narrow, muck-filled street, a warm rectangle of orange light spills out onto the wet stones. It is a window, unshuttered for the moment to let out the heat and the smoke. Above the door swings a painted sign, squeaking rhythmically on rusted hinges in the rising wind. It depicts a crude sheaf of wheat or perhaps an overflowing tankard. It's hard to tell under the layers of grime, but the message is clear. This is the alehouse, the town's living room, the beating heart of warmth in a cold, stone world. The smell hits you before the sound does. It drifts across the alleyway, a rich, intoxicating vapor that cuts right through the stench of the cesspits and the rain. It smells of roasted malt and hops, of yeast bubbling in the dark. There is the savory, heavy scent of pork fat rendering over a fire, and the sharp, acidic tang of hard cider. It is the smell of comfort. It is the smell of civilization. Your stomach gives a painful, hollow contraction, a physical reminder of the stale crust you ate at dawn. You have coins in your pouch. You collected them earlier from the market stalls, that handful of unwanted tax that the merchants let you take just to make you leave. You have enough copper and clipped silver to buy a full pitcher of small beer, a loaf of white bread, perhaps even a seat near the fire where you could dry your soaking tunic until it steams. But you do not cross the street. You do not lift the latch. You do not step over the threshold. If you were to walk through that door, the room would not just go silent, it would turn to ice. The laughter that you can hear now, a low, rolling rumble of communal happiness, would accept a knife to the throat. The musician strumming a battered lute in the corner would stop mid-chord. This is one of the strangest and most exhausting paradoxes of your existence. You are an officer of the court. You are essential to the functioning of the law. You keep the streets clean of waste and stray animals. You execute the king's justice. Yet, by the ancient laws of infamy, you are socially dead. You are untouchable. You lean your head back against the wet wall of the building, closing your eyes, listening to the muffled sounds of the tavern. You imagine the scene inside. You know it well, though you have rarely seen it. There is a fire roaring in the central hearth, logs popping and hissing, sending sparks up the blackened chimney. The air is thick and hazy with smoke, but it is warm, so incredibly warm. Men sit on benches polished smooth by generations of trousers, shoulder to shoulder, sharing heat, sharing bacteria, sharing life. They are complaining about the harvest, about their wives, about the taxes, about the rain. They are playing dice, the ivory cubes clattering against the scarred oak tables. You create a picture of the ale in your mind. Thick, brown, nutritious liquid bread. You imagine the cool weight of a pewter tankard in your hand, the condensation on the metal, the foam touching your lip. But you know the reality would be far different. In some towns, if an executioner enters a tavern, he must stand in a designated corner, far from the other patrons. He cannot sit. He cannot approach the fire. If the landlord agrees to serve him and many will simply bar the door, he will not be given a tankard like a human being. They would bring you the executioner's cup. It might be a chipped wooden bowl kept separate from the rest of the crockery, hidden away in a dusty cupboard so it doesn't contaminate the good plates. Or worse, they might serve you in a cheap clay mug, and then, the moment you have drained the last drop, the landlord would take a hammer and smash the vessel to dust right in front of you. They would rather destroy their own property than risk another man's lips touching the rim where yours have been. The waste of it bothers you more than the insult. You are a practical man. You know the value of a good cup. to see it shattered simply because you are the one who ensures the laws are upheld. It makes you tired. A deep, spiritual exhaustion that settles in your bones. Colder than the rain. So you stay outside. You watch the rain drip from the thatch of the tavern roof, forming a puddle that reflects the warm light of the window. You watch a shadow move across the opening, a serving girl. Perhaps carrying a tray of roasted turnips. You can hear the heavy thud of a fist on a table, followed by a roar of agreement or victory. You are 10 feet away from warmth, but you might as well be on the moon. The rain begins to fall harder now, drumming against your hood with increasing insistence. The water has soaked through your boots, and your toes are numb, curling against the damp leather in a futile attempt to generate friction. The dampness has seeped through the shoulders of your tunic, making the fabric heavy and stiff. It chafes against your neck. You look down at your hands. They are red and raw from the cold, the dirt of the day's labor etched into the lines of your palms. These are the hands that shoveled the waste. These are the hands that cleared the strays. These are the hands that will, when the court demands it, swing the sword or tie the knot. They are strong hands, capable hands. But to the people inside that warm, golden room, they are cursed. A door opens down the street, and a gust of wind catches the tavern sign, making it shriek like a wounded animal. The light from the window flickers as someone inside passes in front of the candle. For a brief second, you catch the eye of a man sitting near the window. He is chewing on a bone, his face flushed with ale and heat. He looks out into the gloom, squinting against the dark. He sees you. He stops chewing. The flush doesn't leave his face, but his expression hardens. He doesn't look away in fear. He looks at you with a dull, bovine recognition. He knows what you are. He knows you are standing in the rain, and he knows that is exactly where you belong. He turns his back to the window, engaging the man next to him in conversation, blocking the light, blocking you out. You let out a breath, a plume of white steam that dissipates instantly in the wet air. The longing for the ale fades, replaced by the familiar, dull ache of resignation. It is not anger. You don't have the energy for anger. It is just the way the world is built. There are those inside the circle of the firelight, and there are those who must stand in the dark to guard it. You push yourself off the wall. Your joints pop, stiff from the cold and the standing. The mud sucks at your heels as you take the first step back into the center of the street. The dream of the hearth is gone, washed away by the relentless, graying drizzle. You cannot go in. You cannot drink. You cannot warm yourself. But there is one door that is technically open to you. One place where your presence is mandated, even if it is not desired. The bells have stopped ringing, leaving a vibrating silence in the air that seems to pull you forward. You wrap your arms around your chest, tucking your chin down to keep the rain off your face, and turn your back on the golden window of the Pig and whistle. You trudge heavily through the slurry of the street, moving away from the laughter and the smell of roasting meat, walking toward the looming, dark silhouette of the church. It is time for Vespers, and even God, it seems, prefers you to keep your distance. The heavy oak doors of the church loom above you. Ancient wood bound in black iron straps that look like the ribs of some long-dead leviathan at Dias Dias. You can hear the low, muffled drone of the congregation already inside, a collective murmur that sounds less like prayer and more like the hive hum of a disturbed nest. You push against the wood. It is heavy, resistant, as if the building itself is reluctant to admit you. With a groan of rusted hinges that cuts through the evening mist, the door gives way, and you slip inside, careful to close it softly behind you, though the creak echoes accusingly through the vaulted ceiling. The change in atmosphere is immediate, but it is not the comfort one expects from a sanctuary. You might imagine stepping into a church means stepping into warmth, into the golden glow of beeswax candles and the embrace of a loving community. But that is a fantasy for the history books, or perhaps a luxury for the wealthy merchants huddled near the front. For you, stepping inside is merely trading the wet, biting cold of the open air for the stagnant, bone-deep chill of the crypt. The air here is still, trapped by stone walls that have been soaking up the winter frost for centuries, holding it tight and releasing it slowly against your skin. You do not walk up the center aisle. You know better than that. To walk the center aisle would be an act of aggression, a contamination of the space occupied by the decent, the clean, the souls who haven't spent their afternoon shoveling waste or severing ears. Instead, you stick to the perimeter, your shoulder brushing against the rough, damp limestone of the back wall. You move like a ghost, haunting the edges of the room, heading for the darkest, draftiest corner near the heavy doors you just entered. This is your place. There is no reserved pew with a velvet cushion waiting for you. There is no carved nameplate. There is only a patch of uneven flagstones, worn smooth by the shuffling feet of the outcasts who came before you. It is the spot furthest from the altar, furthest from the heat of the candles, and furthest from the eyes of God, or at least, that is how the arrangement feels. You take your position, standing stiffly. The stone floor immediately begins to leach the remaining heat from your soles, bypassing the thin leather of your boots as if they weren't even there. You clasp your hands in front of you, the skin red and scrubbed raw, hiding them in the sleeves of your tunic not out of piety, but to keep the blood flowing in your fingers. The smell of the place hits you now. It is a complex, suffocating bouquet. Overriding everything is the thick, cloying scent of frankincense and myrrh, swinging from the thurible in clouds of gray smoke near the altar. It is meant to represent the prayers of the faithful rising to heaven. But you know its practical purpose is to mask the stench of the unwashed congregation, packed tightly together in the nave. Beneath the incense, you catch the notes of damp wool, the sourness of old sweat, the metallic tang of wet iron, and the undeniable earthy rot of the floor rushes that haven't been changed since autumn. Far ahead, 100 yards away through the forest of stone pillars, the priest stands bathed in a pool of golden light. He is a small, distant figure, his back turned to you, his voice a rhythmic, droning monotone. He chants in Latin, words that tumble over one another in a hypnotic stream. Deus in adiutorium meum intende. You don't understand the words. Most of the people standing in front of you don't understand the words. It is just sound, a vibration in the air, a spell woven to keep the dark at bay. You watch the backs of the townspeople. You see the merchant who wouldn't take the bread from your hand earlier today. He is kneeling on a thick prayer rug, head bowed. You see the baker, the tanner, the smith. They are shoulder to shoulder, a solid wall of humanity. And then there is the gap. It is subtle, but from your vantage point, it is undeniable. Between the last row of the accepted citizens and the spot where you stand, there is a buffer zone, a few yards of empty, cold stone. No one stands there. Even when the church is full, when people are spilling out of the side chapels, that space remains empty. It is an invisible barrier, a cordon sanitaire constructed of superstition and fear. They believe your shadow is bad luck. They believe your breath carries the taint of the gallows. Even here, in the house of their Savior who preached love and forgiveness, they recoil from you as if you are the disease itself. You shift your weight from one aching foot to the other. Your back spasms, a dull, thumping pain remembering the weight of the iron tools you polished this morning, and the heavy shovels of sludge you lifted this afternoon. You want to kneel to rest your legs, but the stone floor here is wet with condensation. If you kneel, the damp will soak through your breeches in seconds, and you will be shivering uncontrollably before the Magnificat is even half over. So you stand, You stand like a statue, a gargoyle brought inside and forgotten in the corner. The service drags on. It is a test of endurance. The drone of the priest's voice bounces off the stone vaults, echoing and re-echoing until it becomes a blur of noise. A gray static that matches the gray light fading in the high, narrow windows. Your eyes grow heavy. The fatigue is physical, a weight pressing down on your eyelids. It would be so easy to slide down the wall, to curl up in the shadows and sleep. But you cannot. You must bear witness. You must show that you are a Christian soul, even if the town treats you like a pagan beast. If you stop coming, if you stop showing your face in the shadows, the whispers will turn to accusations. He has no soul. They will say, he is a creature of the devil. And a creature of the devil does not keep his job or his head for very long. So you fight the sleep. You focus on the sensory details to stay awake. You watch a spider weaving a web between the iron hinges of the door next to you. You listen to the wet, chesty cough of an old woman somewhere in the nave. You feel the draft whistling through the crack in the door. A knife of ice slicing against your neck. There is a moment in the liturgy, the Pax Domini, the passing of the peace. Near the front, the wealthy turn to one another. They clasp hands. They offer the kiss of peace, a stylized embrace, murmuring blessings. The gesture ripples backward through the crowd. Merchants nod to tradesmen nod to laborers. The wave of connection travels down the nave, binding the community together in a web of social and spiritual solidarity. The wave reaches the back row. The last man turns, looks over his shoulder, sees you standing in the gloom, and turns back around. The wave dies at his heels. The circuit is broken. You stand there, hands still hidden in your sleeves, watching the backs of heads. You are the grounding wire where the charge dissipates. There is no peace for you, not from them. You are the sin-eater of the city. You take on the burden of their violence, the stain of their justice, so they can remain clean. And because you carry their darkness, they cannot touch you. You lower your gaze to the flagstones. You are used to this. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. You tell yourself that the silence is better than their false charity. But as the cold seeps upward into your shins, making your joints feel like rusted hinges, a profound hollowness opens up in your chest. It is a hunger that has nothing to do with the stale bread you ate for breakfast. It is the starvation of a herd animal separated from the pack. The chanting finally crescendos. The Benedicamus Domino rings out. Deo gratias. The crowd responds, a rumble of relief that the standing and kneeling is finally over. The heavy scent of incense begins to dissipate as the great doors at the front are thrown open. The congregation begins to file out. They move in a bustling stream, chatting now, the solemnity of the service instantly replaced by gossip and plans for the evening meal. You do not move. You cannot leave yet. If you try to exit now, you will clog the doorway. You will force them to brush against you, and that could lead to anger, to a shove, to a complaint lodged with the sheriff. So you wait. You stand in your corner, melting into the shadows, becoming part of the architecture. You watch them leave. You watch the families, the fathers lifting tired children onto their shoulders, the wives adjusting their shawls against the night air. You watch the warmth of human connection flow out of the building, leaving it emptier and colder than before, only when the last straggler has gone, when the sacristan begins to snuff out the candles one by one, plunging the church into creeping darkness. Do you finally peel yourself away from the wall? Your legs are stiff, your feet numb blocks of wood. You walk toward the door. You do not look at the altar. You do not look at the crucifix. You simply push against the heavy oak. Stepping out of the stone gloom and into the true dark of the night, the rain has stopped. but the air is thick with fog. The city gates will be closing soon. The respectable people are inside their homes, barring their doors. You are outside, and you have a long walk ahead of you. The silence of the church follows you, ringing in your ears, not as a blessing, but as a reminder of just how singular your existence truly is. You pull your cloak tighter, duck your head, and begin the trudge toward the edge of town. The heavy oak doors of the church thud shut behind you with a finality that vibrates in your chest. A dull, hollow boom that signals the end of your spiritual allowance for the week. The echo of the closing latch seems to chase you down the stone steps, pushing you away from the consecrated ground and back into the mud of the street. It is the time of evening that the French call l'heure bleue, the blue hour, though to your eyes, it looks more like the color of bruised slate. The sky is pressing down, a heavy lid of gray clouds extinguishing the last bruised purples of the sunset, and the air has taken on that particular biting chill that rises from the damp earth once the sun abandons it. You wrap your rough wool cloak tighter around your shoulders. It is heavy with dampness, smelling faintly of the wet dog you chased earlier in the stagnant air of the dungeon. A personal atmosphere that travels with you like a dismal cloud. You keep your head down, eyes fixed on the churned-up slurry of the road, navigating the ruts and puddles by muscle memory. Around you, the city is undergoing a transformation. This is the moment when the respectable citizens scurry. You can hear the slap of wooden pattens on stone, the hurried rustle of heavy skirts, and the clatter of shutters being slammed and barred. There is a frantic energy to it, a collective holding of breath as the population retreats behind their thick wooden doors to huddle around hearths you will never see. They are racing against the dark, racing to lock out the night and everything that comes with it, including you. You move against the current, a solitary dark shape drifting toward the periphery. You do not scurry. There is no point. Your pace is measured, heavy, a slow, rhythmic trudge that splashes softly in the mire. You know the guards at the city gate will not lock it until you are through. Not out of kindness, and certainly not out of respect, but out of strict adherence to the law. The city must be purged of its unclean elements before the great iron key turns. You are the last bit of refuse they need to sweep out the door. As you approach the city walls, the grand stone archway of the gate looms above you, a black mouth swallowing the last of the light. The walls are massive, reassuringly thick, designed to keep monsters and armies at bay. It is a strange, bitter irony that you, the man who enforces the king's justice, the man who cleans the streets and maintains the order, are classified on the side of the monsters. You belong out there, in the unpatrolled dark. The guards are there, leaning on their pikes, their breath pluming in the cold air. They are talking amongst themselves, laughing at some crude joke. But the laughter dies instantly as you come into view. The silence that falls is heavy, thick with that familiar mix of superstition and disgust. They don't challenge you. They don't ask for a toll. They simply step back, pressing themselves against the cold stone of the archway to ensure that not even the hem of your cloak brushes against their greaves. You pass beneath the portcullis, the jagged iron teeth hanging above your head like a suspended threat. The tunnel of the gatehouse is a wind tunnel, amplifying the draft, smelling of cold stone, rusty iron, and the urine of stray animals. Your footsteps echo loudly here, a lonely clack-squelch that announces your departure. And then you are out. The transition is instantaneous and jarring. Inside the walls, even in the darkening evening, there is a sense of containment, of paved order, of thousands of bodies generating a collective heat. Outside, the world feels vast, wild, and incredibly empty. The temperature seems to drop 10 degrees the moment your foot hits the earth beyond the moat. The wind, no longer broken by the chaotic jumble of rooftops and chimneys, hits you with a flat, unobstructed force, cutting right through your damp tunic to the skin beneath. Behind you, you hear the heavy groan of the hinges. You don't turn around. You've heard it 1,000 times, but you can picture the guards heaving against the wood. Then comes the thunderous clack of the crossbar dropping into place. The sound is final. It is the sound of the world turning its back on you. The bridge is drawn, or the chains are rattled tight. The city is sealed. If you were attacked now, if you fell and broke your leg, if you screamed for help, no one would come. You are effectively legally dead until sunrise. The road here is worse. Inside the city, the mud is mixed with refuse and straw. Here, it is just thick, clinging clay that grabs at your ankles, adding weight to every step. The path winds away from the looming silhouette of the walls, leading toward the jagged tree line and the desolate patches of scrubland where decent people do not build homes. You are not entirely alone out here, though the company offers no comfort. As you trudge along the cart track, you see the faint, flickering light of the leper hospital in the distance. The Lazar house? They, too, are forced to live beyond the protection of the walls. In the hierarchy of the damned, you are strange bedfellows, the ones who are rotting while they live, and the one who deals death for a living. You give their encampment a wide berth. Even an executioner fears the living death, and the wind coming from that direction carries a sickly sweet odor of decay that makes your empty stomach turn. The darkness is total now. There are no torches here, no spill of candlelight from tavern windows. There is only the gray luminescence of the cloud-covered moon and the dark shapes of trees that seem to lean in as you pass. Your senses heighten in the gloom. You hear the rustle of a fox in the underbrush, the hoot of an owl that sounds like a mournful question. Every snapping twig sounds like a footstep behind you. You grip the small knife at your belt, not that you expect to use it. Most bandits and thieves know who walks this path. They know that killing you brings bad luck, and robbing you brings only coins that no merchant will touch. You are protected by your own curse. Your legs ache, a deep, throbbing dullness centered in your calves and the soles of your feet. It has been a day of standing. Standing on the stone floor of the dungeon, standing in the filth of the cesspit, standing in the back of the church. Now this walk feels interminable. The dampness from the ground seeps up through the thin leather of your boots, numbing your toes. You wiggle them as you walk, just to make sure they are still there. Ahead, the shape of your cottage emerges from the dark like a jagged tooth. It sits alone, darker than the night around it. It is a hovel, really, indistinguishable from a peasant's shed, but the thatch is rotting and the wattle and daub walls are peeling, leaning slightly to the left as if the house itself is tired. There is no welcoming smoke rising from the chimney. You let the fire die out this morning to save wood, and you know that the air inside will be colder than the air outside. You reach the door. It is rough wood, swollen with moisture, and it sticks in the frame. You have to shove it with your shoulder, a jarring impact that rattles your teeth. Before it gives way with a screech of protest, you step over the threshold and into the absolute blackness of your home. The air is stale, smelling of old soot, dry herbs, and the profound, dusty silence of a space that has been empty all day. You close the door behind you, sliding the bolt home. Though there is little point. You are already locked out of the world. Locking yourself in is just a formality. You lean back against the wood of the door for a moment, letting your head thump softly against the planks. The silence rings in your ears, louder than the church bells, louder than the market crowd. It is a heavy, physical weight. This silence, it presses against your eardrums. There is no wife to ask about your day, No children playing by the hearth. Not even a dog to greet you. Animals tend to shy away from the smell of blood and fear that clings to your clothes. There is just you, the dark and the cold. But you cannot rest yet. You push yourself off the door. The exhaustion is pulling at your eyelids, dragging your body down, begging you to collapse onto your pallet of straw. But you can feel the day on your skin, the grime of the streets, the residue of the dungeon, the invisible film of the town's hatred. You cannot sleep in the skin. You navigate the darkness by touch, your fingers brushing the rough surface of the table, reaching for the flint and steel. You need light. You need water. You need to scrub this existence off your body before you can close your eyes. The spark is small at first. A tiny, fleeting star that dies almost as soon as it is born against the charred linen of your tinderbox. You strike the flint again. The sound is a sharp, metallic clack that seems aggressively loud in the profound silence of your isolated cottage. A second spark, hotter this time, catches the fibers. You blow on it gently, coaxing the orange glow to eat the fabric. And then you transfer that fragile heat to the wick of the candle waiting on the table. It isn't a good candle. You know this because you know the smell. In the great cathedrals and the houses of the wealthy merchants you are forbidden to visit. They burn beeswax clean, honey-scented, burning with a steady, golden clear light. But out here, past the city walls, in the damp abode of the executioner, you burn tallow. As the flame finally takes hold, the room fills with the heavy, cloying scent of rendered animal fat. It smells like a kitchen fire that has gone stale, a greasy, meaty odor that clings to the air. The light it casts is sputtering and yellow, throwing long, agitated shadows against the rough-hewn stone walls. These shadows dance and jerk with every flicker of the draft that seeps through the cracks in your door, making the room feel crowded even though you are completely, utterly alone. You sit heavily on the three-legged stool, the wood groaning in protest under your weight. Before you sits the bucket. It's a simple wooden pail, bound with rusting iron hoops, filled with water drawn from the well hours ago. In the depths of winter, or even in the chill of a damp spring evening like this, the water has had time to settle into a temperature that is less like liquid and more like liquid ice. You hesitate for a moment. Just a moment. Your hands are resting on your knees, fingers curled slightly. They are stained. Not necessarily with the visceral remnants of your grim profession, though that happens, but with the accumulated grime of a day spent as a pariah. There is the mud from the cesspits you were forced to clear, the dust of the streets where crowds parted to avoid you, the grease of the stray dogs you chased, and the general, pervasive filth of a medieval city. But more than the physical dirt, there's the sensation of the day itself coating your skin. It feels like a film, a heavy, invisible layer of judgment and rejection that has settled into your pores. You feel it between your fingers and under your fingernails. You feel it in the creases of your palms. You plunge your hands into the water. The shock is instant. The cold bites hard, a sharp, stinging sensation that rushes up your wrists and settles deep in the bones of your forearms. It takes the breath out of you for a second, causing your chest to tighten. The water is so cold it feels thick, resisting your movement. You hold your hands there, submerged in the freezing darkness of the bucket, letting the numbness begin to set in. You need the numbness. It's better than the phantom sensation of the rope, the axe, or the shovel. Or you reach for the soap. It sits on a jagged shard of slate next to the bucket. A rough, irregular lump that looks more like a stone than a cleaning agent. This is not the perfumed, milled soap of the French courts. This is soft soap, a harsh, caustic mixture of wood ash and animal fat, It is gray and gelatinous, gritty to the touch. It doesn't lather so much as it smears. A slippery, abrasive substance that smells faintly of lye and smoke. You begin to scrub. The motion is rhythmic, almost mechanical. Left hand over right, right hand over left. You work the harsh soap into your knuckles, driving the grit into the ridges of your skin. You focus entirely on the sensation of friction. You are trying to scour away the day, to strip off the identity that the town has forced upon you. The executioner is a man who touches the untouchable. You handle the dead, the condemned, the diseased, and the waste. In the eyes of the townspeople, Emma, you are physically and spiritually contagious. They believe that a miasma, a bad air, surrounds you. If they touch you, they believe they might wither or fall ill. If they drink from a cup you have held, they believe the water turns to poison. You know this is superstition, born of fear and ignorance. But after a lifetime of flinching faces and recoiling bodies, you start to feel it too. You feel dirty, you feel toxic, so you scrub harder. The water in the bucket begins to turn murky, clouding with the loosened soil and ash. The sound of splashing water echoes softly in the small room, a wet, rhythmic sloshing that marks the passage of time. Splash. Scrub. Splash. Scrub. You pay special attention to the fingernails. You dig the short, blunt nails of one hand into the palm of the other, scraping and scouring. You pick up a small, stiff brush made of hog bristles, one of your few tools for personal care, and attack the skin. The bristles are hard and unforgiving. They scratch at the surface, turning your skin from a pale, cold white to a vibrant, angry red. The cold of the water fights against the heat of the friction. Your hands ache with a deep, throbbing dullness from the temperature. Yet the skin's surface burns and tingles. It's a confused sensory signal. Pain and cleanliness mixing together. You wash your wrists, pushing the sleeves of your tunic up further to ensure no part of the contaminated skin remains. You splash the freezing water onto your face, gasping as it hits your cheeks and runs into your beard. You rub the lye soap into your forehead, over your nose, across your neck, scrubbing until the skin feels tight and raw. The smell of the tallow candle is thick in your nose, mixing with the smell of the wet wool of your sleeves and the metallic scent of the cold water. You rinse. You cup the freezing water and pour it over your hands, watching the gray suds slide away, falling back into the pail. You do it again and again. You are looking for a specific feeling, a feeling of absolute neutrality. You want your hands to feel like they belong to no one. You want to wash away the executioner so that only the man remains. The skin on your knuckles is now cracked. The harsh lye has stripped away every ounce of natural oil, leaving the surface brittle. In the winter months, these cracks will bleed, weeping small lines of crimson that sting sharply when you work. But for now, they just look red and inflamed. Raw patches that testify to your desperation to be clean. You pull your hands from the water, shaking them off. Droplets fly into the shadows, caught for a brief second by the flickering candlelight like falling diamonds before vanishing into the darkness of the floor. You reach for the cloth. It is a length of hessian, rough and scratchy, more like a grain sack than a towel. There is no softness in your life, not even in drying your hands. You rub the coarse fabric over your skin, the friction generating a new wave of heat that battles the lingering chill of the well water. You dry between each finger methodically. You dry the palms. You dry the wrists. You look at your hands in the dim, yellow light. They are trembling slightly, perhaps from the cold, perhaps from the exhaustion that is finally catching up to you. They are clean. They are red, raw and aching, but they are clean. The dirt of the market, the filth of the cesspit. The touch of the condemned, it is all swirling in the gray. Stagnant water of the bucket now. You stare at that water for a long moment. It holds the day's sins. You will have to throw it out in the morning, out onto the hard earth where nothing grows. But for tonight, it stays here, a contained vessel of everything you wish to forget. The candle has burned down an inch, the tallow dripping down the side in weeping rivulets of hardened fat. The flame is guttering, dancing wildly as the wind outside picks up, whistling through the eaves of your lonely cottage. The shadows in the corner of the room seem to stretch toward you, heavy and inviting. Your shoulders slump. The adrenaline of the cold water is fading, replaced by a leaden weight that pulls at your eyelids. The ritual is done. You are as clean as you are allowed to be. The raw stinging of your hands is a grounding sensation, a reminder that you are still alive, still feeling, despite the numbness the world tries to impose on you. You wipe the last dampness from your beard with the rough towel and toss it onto the table. It lands with a soft thud beside the flint and steel. The silence of the house rushes back in to fill the space left by the splashing water. It is a heavy silence, thick with the damp cold of the stone floor. You turn away from the bucket, leaving the gray water to settle. Your body feels ancient, every joint stiff, every muscle holding the tension of 1,000 unsaid words and 1,000 averted gazes. The day is finally, truly over. The scrubbing has stripped away the executioner, leaving just you tired, cold, and ready to surrender. You turn toward the corner of the room, where the shadows are deepest and where your rest awaits. The wooden frame of your bed sits in the far corner of the single room, pushed up against the wattle and daub wall where the draft is slightly less aggressive. It is not a bed in the sense that future generations will understand. There are no springs, no memory foam, no Egyptian cotton sheets counted by the thread. It is a rough-hewn timber box, raised off the cold mud floor on 4 stout legs, supporting a lattice of heavy hemp ropes. This is where the saying, "sleep tight," comes from, because if you haven't taken the wooden key and tightened those sagging ropes recently, you will spend the night folded like a pocket knife in a hammock of your own making. You didn't tighten them tonight. You don't have the energy. You simply stare at the mattress, a large sack of coarse linen known as a tick, stuffed to the bursting point with straw that was harvested months ago. It doesn't look inviting so much as it looks inevitable. It is the only place left for you to go. You sit on the edge, and the ropes groan in a low, timber-creaking protest that sounds startlingly loud in the quiet cottage. The straw inside the tick crunches and shifts, compressing under your weight. This is the reality of medieval bedding. It is loud. Every movement you make is accompanied by the rustle of dried stalks breaking and the friction of rough fabric. Over time, that straw inside turns to dust, settling into a hard, dense slab at the bottom of the sack, requiring you to reach inside and fluff it up, or drag the whole thing out to the field to empty and refill. But that is a chore for another day. Tonight, you accept the lumps, you accept the hollows, you swing your legs up, your bare feet finally leaving the chill of the slate floor. The relief is instantaneous, a dull, throbbing release of pressure from your soles and ankles. You have spent the last 14 hours on your feet walking the perimeter, standing in the square, chasing dogs, bracing yourself in the mud of the cesspits. Your joints feel like rusted hinges that have finally been allowed to stop moving. You lie back, and the straw tick conforms reluctantly to your spine. It isn't soft, but it supports you, holding your exhausted body in a grip of dry, crackling vegetation. You pull the blanket up to your chin. It is a heavy, dark wool, woven tightly to repel water and trap heat. It scratches against your neck, itching the skin, but the itch is a fair trade for the warmth it promises. It smells intensely of sheep, of lanolin and wet animal hair. A scent that never really leaves the fabric no matter how many times you hang it in the sun. It is a heavy, suffocating weight on your chest, pressing you down into the mattress, anchoring you to the bed before you close your eyes. You have one final task. You reach out a hand, raw and red from the scrubbing, toward the small wooden stool beside the bed. The tallow candle is sputtering there, the flame dancing in the draft that whistles through the gaps in the doorframe. You pinch the wick with a wet thumb and forefinger, or perhaps you just cup your hand and blow a short, sharp breath. The light vanishes. The darkness that follows is not the darkness of a modern bedroom. There are no streetlights filtering through blinds, no LEDs from a charging phone, no digital clock glowing red numerals in the void. It is a total, absolute, suffocating blackness. It is the kind of dark that feels heavy, like a physical substance pouring into the room to fill the space where the light used to be. For a moment, your eyes strain, trying to find a reference point: the window, the hearth, the door, but there is nothing. You are simply floating in the void. Then, the smell hits you. The extinguished candle releases a thin ribbon of gray smoke, filling the small corner of the room with the acrid, stinging scent of burnt animal fat. It lingers in the stagnant air, mixing with the smell of the damp earth floor, the old straw beneath you, and the faint, coppery scent of the tools hanging on the far wall. This is the olfactory landscape of your night, as you lie there, waiting for your body to generate enough heat to warm the cold wool. You listen. This is the other profound difference of your life. Inside the city walls, even at night, there is a hum. The watchman walking the walls, the drunken arguments spilling out of a tavern, the clatter of a cart, the crying of a baby in a crowded tenement. But you are outside the walls. You are the outcast. And out here, the silence is aggressive. You hear the wind moving through the long grass of the executioner's plot. You hear the unsettling, rhythmic scratching of a branch against the thatched roof, like a fingernail testing the durability of your shelter. Far off, in the woods that border the town, a fox screams a high, human-sounding shriek that would terrify a visitor, but to you, it is just another neighbor. You are alone in a way that is legally mandated. Most people in this era sleep communally. A merchant sleeps with his wife, his children, and perhaps an apprentice or two, all piled into a great bed or on pallets on the floor. A tangle of limbs and body heat. They share the warmth, they share the security. But the executioner sleeps alone. No one shares your bed. No one warms the other side of the straw tick. You are the custodian of the dark, and you must inhabit it by yourself. Your breathing slows, becoming the loudest sound in the room. In and out. In and out. The cold air fills your lungs and cools you from the inside, while the wool traps your heat on the outside. You feel your muscles twitching as they discharge the day's tension. The ache in your shoulders, born from the repetitive motion of the sharpening stone, begins to dull into a numb heaviness. You drift toward what historians will later call the first sleep. You see, in your time, sleep is often not one continuous block. You will likely sleep deeply for 4 hours, a dead, black slumber of pure exhaustion. Then, sometime after midnight, you might wake. The watch of the night. Others in the town might use that time to pray, to check the fire, to have quiet conversations with their bedmates in the dark. But you will have no one to talk to. If you wake in the wolf hour, you will simply stare into the blackness, listening to the timber settling, perhaps thinking about the blade you sharpened, or the rain falling on the roof. You might feel a pang of that crushing loneliness, the social exile that defines your waking hours bleeding into your rest. Or more likely, you will be too tired to care. You will simply roll over, the straw crunching loudly under your hip, and let the fatigue drag you back down for the second sleep that will carry you until the rooster crows. But that is for later. Right now, there is only the descent. The boundary between the room and your body begins to dissolve. The scratchy wool stops feeling itchy and just feels warm. The smell of the burnt tallow fades into the background. The hunger in your belly, satisfied only by stale crusts, quiets down. The heavy iron door of your consciousness begins to close. You are no longer the executioner. You are no longer the cleanser of cesspits. You are no longer the man people cross the street to avoid. In the dark, stripped of your tunic and your hood, stripped of your tools and your shame, you are just a breathing creature seeking restoration. The stone walls of your cottage seem to shrink, wrapping around you like a cocoon. The darkness presses against your eyelids. Heavy and soothing, the day is done. The judgment is over. The silence of the outcast finally becomes a comfort, a blanket of quiet that no one in the bustling and crowded city can truly afford. You sink into the straw, deeper and deeper, until the damp cottage, the medieval world, and the burden of your profession simply fade away. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and central heating, maybe say a quiet thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors who fought the mud, the cold, and the isolation so you wouldn't have to. The silence you enjoy is a luxury, not a sentence, and your rest is your own. Sweet dreams.